Greetings, you fleshy bag of organs. This is episode 105 of the Warhammer 40,000 podcast known as Look Out, Sir. My name is Dan, and it's that bit at the beginning of the show where I introduce my good buddy Philip. How is it going, Phil?
Yeah, it's going pretty well. I've managed to hit all my deadlines for all my painting stuff that we've been talking about for the last few weeks. Finished my Minotaurs for the LGT, which we'll be talking about shortly. And I finished touching up all my Kriegy bits for No Retreat, where I am flying off tomorrow to sunny Gibraltar. So looking forward to a mini holiday / another chance to roll dice and play 40k.
Wonderful times, man. Off into the sky to land in the land of Gibraltar and to participate in what you broadly specify as the finest gaming event in all the land, right?
It is a bit of a premium event. I think is one to aspire to go to for people that haven't. That's
there we go.
What I would say.
There we go. We all, merely get the privilege and pleasure of listening to your many tales of the incredible experience there are in. But unfortunately, for those that won't be able to go, they can enjoy what we're going to be talking about in episode 105, I imagine, Phil, which is what, perchance?
Well, both you, I, and our good pal, or buddy even, Richie,
Richard!
of Quizmaster fame, we all went to the London Grand Tournament. So we're talking about our experiences there. You went for the Saturday and Sunday for the singles event, but you also showed up. Yes, the Try Hard event. Me and Richie took part together in the doubles event, which was a one day on the Friday, of which you were there in the evening, just for a bit of social as well, which we talk about right at the very beginning for the context of how we get into it. But yes, we're talking about our experiences. We're doing an overview chat initially of what we think of the tournament, because we have not naysayed them, but we have spoken poorly of them in the past due to their little foibles of unpainted polystyrene terrain several years ago. But they've redeemed themselves now, and they're actually doing decent events.
Very much so, very much so. Which I suppose in a way kind of spoils our general summary of things, but there's a few little treats in there.
Yeah.
Much like a 5-star review.
Peter!
Oh, hello,
What are
Dad.
you doing in here, son?
Oh, I'm
What
just...
have I told you about wasting your time with these little plastic figurines?
It's not a waste of time, I like it.
How dare you talk back to me, Peter? It's about time you grew up.
I don't want to grow up. Oh, man, maybe there's something on the radio. Yeah, this is nicer.
Peter!
What's that?
That's right, it's me, the ghost of a award-winning TV and radio presenter, Jeremy Beadle.
Jeremy Beadle?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Now let me tell you here, Sonny, my dad was always telling me to grow up, and I never did. And look how successful I was. So ignore him, Peter, and keep playing with that little plastic crack. And while you're at it, listen to the Look Out Sir podcast, which right now is time for the 5-star review.
Wow, thanks, Jeremy.
Who are you talking to with there, son?
Jeremy Beadle.
What? No!
This week's 5-star review comes from, where might you think so, Phil?
Apple Podcasts of Australia.
He's so close yet so far. So close yet so far. I mean, they're practically the same country, I suppose. New Zealand, Phil.
Ooh.
New Zealand.
Ooh. A half point.
A half point, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, New Zealand, to me, as a uneducated fool, feels quite Australian-esque, I imagine it's like confusing Wales and England, right?
Or Canada and America. Much to the irksomeness of the people in Canada or New Zealand, I imagine. Or maybe even Wales.
Potentially. The Welsh do not like being thought of as Canadians, I'm sure.
No, of course they wouldn't.
No, indeed. Who would want such a thing? Anyway, yes, this comes from the lands of hobbits, wizards, dragons, and other Lord of the Rings assorted stuff. Although I also think many of the Peter Jackson films were filmed in New Zealand, so potentially King Kong and what else has he done other than King Kong? Brain Dead, was that him?
Yes, yeah, that was one of his earliest ones. Yeah,
There you go.
a classic.
I doubt he did that in New Zealand though.
I think he did just because that's where he lived. So
Oh right, well that'll be
I
it.
think so. Yeah.
There we go. We don't know for sure, but we said it with enough authority that it sounds like we know.
So Dan wins his events.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Just non-stop cheating, left, right, and centre. Just constantly reasserting myself as no. I think you'll find that's right. But anyway, there you go. Don't let people know my methods, Phil. Otherwise, they will. Otherwise, they'll find me out. Anyway, this 5-star review reads: "Splendid ear food, 5 stars. Every week, I relish the prospect of Dan and Phil dripping moistly into my ear holes."
Brilliant.
I mean, already this is quite fantastic. I forgot to mention, by the way. Oh my God, Phil, I haven't honoured the order of ceremonies. I should tell you the identity of the individual that is giving us this review. It comes from Slightly Unnerving via Apple Podcasts of New Zealand. There you go. So Slightly Unnerving,
Good
which immediately makes sense once you start to read the initial content. I am a slightly little bit unnerved by the assertion of both you and I collaborating into this individual's ear holes. Although I suppose that is what we do fundamentally, right, Phil?
Exactly. We like to slip in there where we reside for a good few hours.
Which is not mostly moist during the process, though. That's the thing.
Maybe not you, but certainly me. I like to think of myself as earwax that you can't get rid of. No cotton bud shall remove me from your ears.
Not that we would advise anyone attempt to remove earwax with cotton buds. I think it's broadly understood that is a very bad idea for you.
You're not meant to, but it feels so good.
I know.
Do it, everyone.
It's one of those things. It's sort of like a weirdly. It's difficult to look away. Like if there's someone kicking around, it's like ooh, stick that on in there. Anyway,
my ear hole needs a good massage with this little fluffy thing on a stick.
Indeed. Does it ever make you sneeze?
No. What?
No.
It's going in my ear, not my nose.
No, I know, but it's weird. Sometimes it makes me sneeze.
That's just
I know, it's weird, isn't it? It just sometimes it's because it's all sort of supposed to be like anyway,
connected. Okay.
Well, maybe that's that's one of my problems.
That is slightly unnerving.
That is slightly unnerving. Absolutely, bringing it back. So, splendid ear food, 5 stars as a prerequisite of 5-star review. Every week, I relish the prospect of Dan and Phil dripping moistly into my ear holes. Their dulcet witticisms on all things 40k do an excellent job of filling the empty hours whilst I patiently wait the heat death of the universe. There we are. I butchered most of those words. I'm quite tired at the time of reading these things, so I'll do it again. In a more kind of informed way. Their dulcet witticisms on all things 40k do an excellent job of filling the empty hours whilst I patiently wait for the heat death of the universe, which I suppose we're all waiting for, aren't we, Phil? Really? Although many of us will not live to see it, I would assume.
I doubt it. Somehow, unless it's going to surprise us like tomorrow.
And even in doing so, it would obviously need to, at the same time, sort of simultaneously create conditions where we were both able to witness it occur and also survive its occurrence long enough, to sort of see it happen, which is highly unlikely. The universe, as it happens outside of the confines of Earth, so says the scientists, it's quite against the idea of creatures like us living within it.
Is it trying all its best to kill us off, is what you're saying?
Essentially, yeah. I think it's just mostly a big old bag of radiation and various flying objects that will destroy you in every way.
No.
Exactly. Just in the form of, invisible, deadly cosmic rays.
That'll make for a fun comic book.
It would, wouldn't it? Absolutely.
Just being attacked by these lines, vertical lines of radiation.
That's it. Anyway, I always look forward to the next installment. My ear holes never dry out. There you go. Crikey, blimey, what's it? Splendid ear food, says Slightly Unnerving. I mean, that was a lovely review, to be fair. I think that's one of my all-time favorites, to be honest with you. I mean, well done. If any of you out there feel like you can produce a better 5-star review than Slightly Unnerving, I do challenge you to do so, because we are approaching that time, Phil. We're almost getting towards the end of the bloat of 5-star reviews.
Oh, well, is there going to be a drought?
I mean, seemingly so. We had a good push early in the year, so we are approaching that time where there is opportunities to get on board the 5-star review train.
Getting quick, basically, before the queue starts building up again for another few months backlog. Because I think when people know that there's a few months wait before it will get read out, they just don't bother. Yeah. But when they know we're running on empty and there's a shortage, we need to hit up that petrol station that is the 5-star reviews.
I love the fact that you were doing such a great job of being subtly current affairs political until you just outright said petrol station. I was like thinking, oh, he's done well there. He's done well. He's given a potential hint to what he was talking about without directly saying it. And then you're just
cut that last word out then.
No. I don't want you to, to have that kudos and credibility.
That's fine. I know it's because you just can't be bothered to edit it, but that's fine.
No, mate, how dare you? I edit so much of this. This is a non-stop editing affair. It's just non-stop editing. It's unbelievable. It was funny actually. At the LGT, I got chatting to Gorgeous George and some of the other Real Space guys, and they were talking about how Paulie from Real Space actually has lines that he's written down and that he actually has to kind of like say as part of like the intro or whatever. Like he actually properly constructs some. Yeah. Mm. That's just, I mean, I couldn't even imagine. Like, could you imagine if we ever scripted this, Phil? How much extra work that would be?
I know. Yeah. Is Gorgeous George the one that won the doubles event? Or was that a different George?
I don't know. George actually went 5-0 at the LGT.
Oh no, it was the singles, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so he went 5-0, and I think he came 6th overall.
Oh, okay.
Which is the best play. Which is one off the best place to finish at the LGT. Basically, at the LGT, you want to play to come 5th based on the way they do things, because that way you don't have to stick around to play in the semi-finals.
The extra 2 games, yeah.
Yeah. 5th place is the best place.
Okay, I was obviously just getting my names mixed up then. But yeah, it rang a bell.
There you go.
Oh, very cool.
Well, there we are. That was us doing the 5-star review bit to kick it all off.
Well, hold on. We haven't officially thanked Unnerving. No, somewhat.
I am
mildly
clearly
unnerving.
Out of my tree this morning, aren't I? This is going terribly wrong. It's not even the morning. We're recording this at around 10 o'clock at night. That goes to illustrate just how utterly ruined I am at this point. Yes, please, Phil. Please thank Slightly Unnerving. My goodness.
I know. Slightly Unnerving. Sorry for the somewhat butchered reading of your review. Dan will, flagellate himself in an apology. I'm sure. Flagellates.
Oh, right, flagellate. Yes.
Yeah. but thank you, Slightly Unnerving. We appreciate us being moist sounds sliding and slipping into your ear holes where we will reside for many hours. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I hope we are as equally moist and up to your suitably wet expectations. Thank you very much.
Well, I love it. I almost feel like you crossed the line there, but
too far, too much.
I think you're all right.
I didn't mention petrol station again.
I'm so tired. I really am very tired. Anyway, right, okay, let's get on with it. This is gonna already. I know this is gonna be gold. Transitional noise. Woo! Hello again, everybody. In this part of the podcast on the LGT theme of it all, we're going to be talking about our general experiences with the event. Myself, Richie, Phil, we all attended, and we all have different opinions because ultimately we all did different things, although not Phil and Richie. They did similar things. Although Phil did have the joy of being somewhat harassed for a while. That was fun, wasn't it, Phil? Do you know, Richie, that old Phil, he's really trim.
I thought he was looking lean.
Lean, that was it.
Lean, yeah.
That was it. Yes, he's looking very lean. How did you feel about that, Phil? Did it make you feel, warm and fuzzy?
In a way, Yeah. For context, this was the end of the Friday of the doubles. Our good friend Adam from Beachhead Brawl.
Is he a good friend still, Phil?
Well, very much, he added me on Instagram, on my personal Instagram afterwards. So
God, he
clearly,
must have been really into you.
Clearly, yeah.
It's like, where's the good stuff, Phil? It's all just pictures of your Krieg and your Minotaurs. Where's the juicy stuff?
I know. He'd obviously had a little bit to drink, and he was
a little bit
overly friendly in a way.
You hadn't seen him for a long time.
He hadn't seen me for a long time, and noticed I'd got lean. Is how he put it. No, he said lean. He
said lean. Sorry, yeah. I keep going back to trim when it's lean. That's the thing, though, Phil. You have, all credit to you, Phil. When I saw him for the first time after a prolonged period of lockdown, he did look lean. That's what I would say. I had to take Adam home, or not home, back to his hotel, because his brother Sai got so upset with him that he just basically was like, "I've had enough. I'm off." And Adam was like, "Yeah, it's fine. I'll find my own way home," and he did, via me giving him a lift. But
why aren't you nice?
Honestly, it was a moment of weakness, but he did lend me a shield captain on Dawn Eagle jet bike, so I felt like I owed him some transportation.
Sounds like suitable payment.
Exactly. And he didn't throw up in my car, despite multiple hints that he might, but he didn't. God bless him.
And did he manage to actually play his games on the Saturday?
He did, although he had a lot of remorse after game one because he felt like he lost a game that he should have won, and that the loss was heavily linked to the fact that he wasn't quite as cognitively aware or whatever as he should have been. So there you go. He has only himself to blame, but he enjoyed himself, I feel.
I know. A fun little fact. Apparently, this was one of our Patreon members had messaged us to ask if we were the LGT. And when I inquired why, he basically said, well, on the Twitch stream on the Friday, you can hear us laughing in the background.
Oh, really?
Yeah, even though we were stood nowhere near where the Twitch stream is happening.
I didn't even know where. It's weird when you're there because you have so little awareness of that aspect of it. I think that's obviously the sort of the inner circle get involved in all that, don't they? They have their little kind of commune that gets involved in streaming and things. But yeah, it's weird. Like when I've watched previous LGTs, like the 2019 one, I thought, oh, this live stream was pretty cool, and it had a certain sort of energy to it, and certainly made the event really kind of stand out. But you get very little, kind of semblance of that when you're actually there. One thing, actually, on the topic of kicking off the conversations around the LGT. Oh no, Phil, please finish your point about the patron question. Was it just they were alarmed at the fact that our voices carried in such a way?
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, I assume it's more your voice than mine, but who actually knows? Maybe it's us both.
No, you've got a booming voice, Phil. You just use it in a very sort of subdued way.
Maybe that is what it was. But yeah, I'm almost interested to watch the Friday live stream now, just to see if you can hear us chat away.
Just hear Adam yelling out, "So!" It's a beautiful thing.
Exactly.
But no, one of my general points, I suppose, is getting into the LGT, because we're just going to do a bit of a general chit chat about it. So on the Friday, I actually felt like the Friday had a pretty good vibe to it. Like people were, getting into the spirit of it. It seemed like it was going to be the beginnings of a good weekend. We got to chat to a bunch of people. I mean, what was your vibe on the Friday when you guys played? It seemed like a cheery occasion on the Friday.
Yeah, I liked it. Obviously, so it's in like a sort of sports running track arena, so it's nice and spacious, very airy, very like high ceilings. There's like hundreds of tables in the middle. And obviously only, I think, like 2 rows of it is reserved for the doubles event, which is what me and Richie were in. There was a bunch for some RTTs that were going on. And then I think most of the others were just empty because they're there for the Saturday and Sunday events. So what I liked about it is there wasn't actually a lot of people about. It was relatively, I would say, spacious, but at the same time it wasn't, because all of our tables were like crammed in amongst each other. Literally the mats, obviously, I don't think they haven't joined the small board gang yet, so they've been they were literally like overlapping each other to make them fit on all the tables. So yeah, there was no like sideboard or anything in terms of the table and the gaming space. That was a bit crammed when you're doing doubles. But the overall vibe was quite nice. There was lots of people there that we knew. Was it Ross and Garfield from the RFW guys? They were there as well. And then yeah, afterwards we got to like hang out and chat with Adam. Mikey from Hellstorm Wargaming was there as well, chatting to us as well for a bit. He's a nice chap. So yeah, overall, we had a pretty good time.
Yeah, it was an intense one. I was chatting to Dan and Nick, who were partnered up. Nick I'd never met before, but Dan I knew from previous events, and they had a funny old time, and they were being quite an intense pair. And then yeah, I got to catch up with obviously Mikey and Adam and. Yeah, lots of people really. It was I was really hopeful on the Friday because it had even though obviously Adam did a good job of dominating our attention with his quite hilarious drunken aspect attitude. I thought it was good, man. It seemed like there was a good vibe around the doubles tournament for the most part. I mean, Rich, what did you think? I mean, this is you. It is fair to say, have been relatively skeptical of these sort of large-scale indie events prior to the LGT. I mean, do you feel like this was a step above what you've seen from others or your own expectations?
I think it's definitely the biggest kind of event of this kind I think I've been to. I thought it was one thing I always like looking forward to these events because you can just meet new people and play and see different armies you don't normally see. And what was nice about at least of what we mostly saw in the opponents we had was they all seemed just nice people, not too competitive, which is historically why we've liked doubles events because it's never like too like I don't know try hard I guess. But it was just kind of nice just having a few games. The best part was it was nice having a few games of Warhammer again with people. It did get quite warm, because one thing is it was called the Friday night doubles, but it started at noon, so that was a bit of that confused me at first. I didn't realize I had to take the afternoon off work. So I was fortunate I was still able to get it off. But it was getting quite warm in there by the end of the day. So I'm glad I was there for the Friday night doubles. My expectation is I would have found the following day when it was packed. That could have been probably a bit too much for me. But it was nice seeing the table. One thing I didn't, and Phil's already mentioned it, that the mats kind of overlapped. So even though it was quite airy and quite spacious, you were still playing on top of each other, which was a bit disappointing when there's so much space that you didn't have anywhere to put your dice or anything. You literally have to be if you got your dead models that's going to go on someone else's board. It was a bit weird.
Yeah, that was a strange aspect of the overall thing. And again, I mean, I don't know what the logistics are with regards to why they have to do it that way, but they definitely did do a lot of overlapping and a lot of condensing of the sort of space. It felt like there definitely could have been opportunities for them to spread it out further to better occupy the space, but seemingly they did. I mean, it never felt cramped though. I mean, this is the one thing I don't want to sort of suggest that it was cramped or that it was particularly kind of confined, but it was one of those things where oddly, even with that, it just sort of seemed like like it wasn't the optimal in the sense that it could have been more comfortable, I suppose. You think when you got that much space, it would be nice to have, facilities like your sideboards and your just your general space to put stuff and just get a little bit more comfortable with it. And that is one of the things about tournament gaming for the most part is it's rare that you attend an event that has those kind of creature comforts baked into it. It's one of the things I really like, not that I'm shilling for them by any stretch of the imagination, but it's one of the things I like about the entoyment events and I so frequently attend because the entoyment facility has got those really nice kind of purpose-built gaming tables that are at a good height, and they've got the the sideboard functionality within the actual kind of like shelving units that they've got beneath the board. So it's really easy to kind of have a comfortable gaming experience at entoyment.
We had I think we had one chair per double. So one of us could sit down or put their models or whatever down on the chair. I think by the end, because there were loads of spares, floating around on the doubles, we could nick some from some of the other tables. Did
Mm.
you, in the singles one, happen to notice that, because we had on our table, on all our tables, you've got the mat, but obviously there's like 2 tables underneath, so pretty much down the middle you've got this weird bump where the tables are at slightly different heights, and it's only by, I don't know, like an inch, half an inch, but yeah, noticeable and a bit odd.
Yeah, no, definitely so. Within the singles competitions as well, the tables were definitely not all consistently flat, which again is bothersome, right? Because you kind of want that if you're going to adopt the mat system, which again is a perfectly viable and sensible solution for this kind of gaming. Then you probably should take steps to try and level it out. But it's not that egregious. I think the boards were one of the weird things as well, though, right? Because I think, obviously, the LGT was synonymous in the past with this polystyrene terrain, although I think the polystyrene terrain was probably the least of their concerns when they first launched in what I believe was 2018. But yeah, the terrain that they had sort of produced for this obviously still had the sort of functional ideals of the, polystyrene style terrain, but it was obviously a bit better to look at, but not hugely so. It's very grey, very bland. And I think that's the thing. It's like, I get that ultimately what can you do when it comes to this scale, but it was one of those things where I was a little bit kind of, it's not an immersive game of 40k. It doesn't feel like, playing on a really kind of cool gaming surface. It just, it definitely is function over form.
Yeah, it was like painted MDF. I think there was like 3 different types of terrain. There was like a big sort of L-shaped ruin that completely blocks line of sight because there's solid walls. There's a smaller L-shaped ruin that has windows in, so if you were on it, you can shoot through it, which is, standard 40k terrain would be. And then there was a sort of smaller, like tiny L shapes, which were ruins, but you would always configure the 2 of them together to form like an S shape, which would count basically as dense terrain when shooting through. And every single mission, you've in the event pack, or at least on the doubles, you've got your map with the mission on it, where the objective markers are, where the terrain needs to be placed. And literally, like every game, you would spend half an hour just setting up the board because you've got to measure everything out. Weirdly, they give you a lot of measurements for where stuff needs to be placed, but not all the measurements. So quite often you're counting the grid squares, because they basically said each square is an inch. So quite often you've got to count them out to work out exactly how the terrain's to be placed. I guess the benefit of the symmetrical terrain layout is, picking deployment isn't really a thing. It doesn't matter. You and your opponent has completely identical, terrain on your side of the table versus your opponent. So stuff like that is an inconsequential roll off. But yeah, it was pretty functional. Weirdly, I didn't mind it too much. I thought, in terms of the actual terrain and what it did, I thought it did quite a good job of it. But as you say, it's not very immersive, and it's not super pretty. But then if for the singles event, there's meant to be like 800 people, so that's like 400 packs of terrain they needed to produce. So I can sort of see why it's a bit on the basic side.
Yeah, I mean, considering, like I was mentioning, considering I had 400 tables at any one point, the terrain was pretty good in that sense. Considering how it was perfectly functional. I'm not a fan of line of sight blocking L shapes at the best of times, but it worked. It didn't look bad, like some of the horror stories I've heard about other events. There's a bit of a faff setting it up before each game, which we did on the first one. We had to spend that whole half an hour figuring it out. We let the other team do it the second time. We turned up a little bit late, and then they'd already done it. It was great. But it was a bit of a faff having to do that each time. But it looked like perfectly serviceable. It wasn't fancy, but it worked.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think for the tournament scene, functionality is the core, feature. And it was playable. I've heard people complain that it wasn't line of sight blocking enough, which is strange to me. I know, right? I mean, again, there's the thing to me though, right? Because I have such a low tolerance for this kind of terrain and this kind of obsession with terrain that the competitive scene has. Because to me, it just isn't, this kind of geometric, mirrored terrain setup just doesn't feel like 40k anyway. Because again, it's like you said, Phil, you don't need to worry about picking a side because they're identical. And that in itself sort of really kind of annoys me because it's like, well, that's not really what 40k should be. It's, there should be tactical decisions about where your deployment zone is. There should be instances where you have to, make tactical decisions as a general and actually think about what your army need, its strengths are and what the matchup is and what you can do. And I think it's just that thing. And again, I'm now at a stage where I've played a lot of games using these terrain layouts and using this style of terrain, and I don't dislike it necessarily as much as I used to, but I'm not in love with it. It's like, I don't like this being the default way that we are supposed to approach the game at all levels. I think, for me, it should be that we should be aspiring to still try and, do the tabletop wargaming thing. Because again, it's that thing where, this kind of system takes away from the immersive tabletop wargaming aspect of things. But then it's funny because recently I've been watching other videos about other tabletop war games again, watching like bat reps and things. And it's funny when you watch tabletop war games, like proper tabletop war games, and understand the system mechanics and the rules, and you realize yet again, and I know we've been beating this drum quite a lot, just how much 40k is not a tabletop war game anymore. Like really to the point that it's just, it's a trading card game in 3-dimensional form. And I stand by that statement because when you actually look at proper wargaming, it's a very different kind of situation. But irrespective of that, the tables were fine. I'm not going to tell them that they were the best things ever, but under the circumstances, the scale of the event, it was fine.
Yeah, I did find
fine.
the large L shapes that had solid walls that you couldn't shoot through a bit frustrating, and I know Richard will probably share this sentiment. In the first game that we played, the objectives were placed in such a way where you can be in those ruins, scoring the objective, and then you just can't be shot at in any way unless you've got some line of sight, ignoring weapons. And beyond that one mission, in the other two, those big pieces of terrain just got completely ignored. And basically we played in other parts of the table where they weren't, because they didn't give you any real benefit to either of our armies, because it wasn't a competitive game. There was in one game a Vanguard detachment with jump packs and stuff like that. But beyond that, it's actually more of a hindrance to people because, there were dreadnoughts, vehicles, Thunderwolf cavalry, stuff that can't use those ruins at all in what would normally be used in a competitive sense. So they didn't. I don't know. I don't like how it skews the meta down a particular list style, which favors effectively jump pack infantry because they get the maximum benefit out of those bits of terrain. Which for us, and also I guess for the doubles in general, weren't what people were kind of built for.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because like I had my big 20-man unit of Vanguard Scutari, and they were hilarious because like literally, like you could use the big L shape, you could position them in it. You do that thing where you go out just outside of an inch of the wall because that's what everyone does when they're playing competitive. And then as soon as someone moves something into within 30 inches of the squad, I'm literally like, cool, I'm just going to step out. And then and then if it's something that I can target with my auto wounds on 5s, I'm just going to delete it. There was one game against a Custodes player where literally my Scutari just stepped out and went, bam, all 3 of your bikes are dead in a turn. and that's the combo with the Manipulus and the Scutari unit. But again, in a more generic, normal, well, I suppose this is fast becoming normal, but in a Games Workshop style terrain setup, that functionality of that unit is drastically reduced, because I can't guarantee it not going punished for turns and losing some of its optimization. And that's the thing with the way that this sort of terrain functions, is it just takes you in very specific directions in terms of the sorts of things that you have to build into your armies and so on. But yeah, it was interesting. I mean, yeah, just what it is. I suppose one of the other things with the event that I thought was really weird as well, and maybe it's just to do with the scale of it. When we've attended Warhammer World events, or even I've attended smaller sort of indie tournaments, there's a good sort of sense of community to those events. When by the time you've finished at a Warhammer World tournament, you and the other 119 players that have been in attendance have kind of built some kind of weird kind of herd sort of mentality, where there's you've built relationships, and you've kind of made connections with people, and then by extension the groups that they are attending with. And by the end of the weekend, sure, you might not have spoken to everyone at the event, but you've got a good feel for the people who are there, and there's a good sort of weirdly kind of strong sense of community to those Warhammer World events by the end. Obviously, for the doubles on the Friday, it might have been different, but certainly by the end of the weekend for the the single stuff, you definitely felt like it was a big event. But I think because of the sort of spirit of competition, it didn't really have the same, at least to me anyway, kind of sense of community to it. It just sort of was like, I'm here as an individual amongst other individuals, all aspiring to do well at 40k. And it just didn't sort of have the same kind of feel good vibes that I get from Warhammer World events or other.
I guess that
in
part might be due to the scale of the event, because it's so big. Whereas Warhammer World is like you're all queuing up for the canteen at lunchtime together, and you normally end up chatting with your opponents that you've played previously and ask them how their other games went and stuff. And we did that a bit on the Friday. I think one thing that I noticed that was sort of absent in the doubles, at least, was they didn't ever really announce the rounds starting. It's like you basically had to constantly check the event pack to find out when the times were. You would submit your scores via the BCP app. You would have to check the time and then check the BCP app for your pairings and what table you're at next. And they didn't, at Warhammer World, they're like 15 minutes left of your game and stuff like that. And they would then say, okay, the next round's starting, and you would all gather around the projector to see where your table is. And I think that those kind of elements do add to that kind of group social dynamic.
I think a bit of audio production and a bit of AV production is essential to events, especially as one of the scale of the LGT. The fact that they didn't have a big projector with the tables and the mission, and the fact there wasn't presentations, or not presentations, but just just explanations between rounds, was a bit baffling. I think, okay, they support other things at the LGT. They've got Blood Bowl, they've got the Game of Thrones game, they've got loads of stuff going on, but 40k is sort of like the main event. So it's weird that they didn't sort of build in some of those AV elements. And I know that's more cost, but it's just those little things that just set the thing off and make it feel a bit more premium. Because you get the same weirdness between rounds where people are like, what's the mission, mate? What we playing? What one's this? What's the mission secondary? What's the terrain setup? All these sort of questions that if they just sort of had some AV equipment just to be like on the screen, you could see the layout and you could see the deployment, you could see the objective placements, you could see the name of the mission, you could see everything, because again, you don't get much fanfare with it anymore. It's like literally like like you kind of want someone to just sort of get you excited about the upcoming game, or talking about like doing like a rundown of who's doing well. It's like the top. I don't know, like you could do the rundown of the top 10 highest scoring games last round, and just, like stuff just to get people like, yeah, I'm doing well, just feel good things. Even if you're on the bottom table, the fact that you just won a game 110 on table, 450, it might be a nice feel good thing for you.
It was kind of strange that it felt kind of disconnected in that when we were only there for the doubles on the Friday, but you kind of turned up and there was no real like check-in or welcome. You just kind of walked in and then found what you checked BCP and found out what table you're supposed to be on.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel like there was anything like anyone or authority or something in charge or leading the proceedings. It was just you just kept checking the app to see where you're supposed to go next, and then you went there, and so it felt weirdly disconnected in a way. Like you're just there and you're playing games and you're moving to the next table, but it didn't feel like a lot. There's something missing.
The only time you had to speak to an official was to get off food vouchers for dinner, because obviously you can pre-book your food, because they were trying to get people to do that rather than like just go to food vans, which have terrible queues, especially what I imagine on the weekend would be. So yeah, and we didn't even know where they were, so we had to sort of ask a few people around, on tables next to us. And eventually it's like, oh yeah, there's a person in a high-vis jacket down by the bar. It's like, okay, right, let's head down there to it. And that was like our only interaction with like an official person. And then at the very end, they did like an announcement for the awards and stuff, which we were waiting around for, which was it was all a bit low-key. It was all like, gather around here, everyone, come on. And then they just, quickly went through all the awards and, a bit of applause, and that was about it. And I was like, okay, cool, let's go home.
I mean, that was the thing with the closing ceremony of the singles as well, though. They just went through best in faction, and they just went so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. It was literally like Richie Churchill, Elder, Phil Spence, Drakari, and it literally just went through the list like that, and then just sort of rattled it off. And it wasn't like people got up and accepted awards or had any kind of pomp or circumstance around it. They literally just sort of went, here's a list of names, well done. And it's like,
did they get to go and collect awards?
Is that it? I assume maybe they had some opportunity to collect something. I mean, I wasn't amongst the winner's circle in that sense, so I wouldn't know. But like, it's just that thing where it just, again, though, I think that's one of the problems a lot of the time with this stuff, though, is people, lose sight of the importance of ceremony. You need ceremony. You need something to make it feel substantial. I think that's a big reason why Pardo and the SM Battle Report guys get such a huge amount of kudos from their community, because when you go there, it feels, from what I ascertain from the people who go there, it feels like it has consequence. It feels like it has, weight behind it, because credit where credit's due, again, based on the statements that I hear from yourself, Phil, and others who have attended, that, that they do a great job of making you feel special, making you feel appreciated, making you feel like, this is important. And, that a lot of that will come from public speaking and addressing the crowd and doing that little bit of extra due diligence in terms of,
they always do that. They always, before
ceremony.
Each mission, run you through the mission, and if there's any oddities about the table layouts, they explain that and stuff, because obviously there's different terrain on every table, so they do all of that. And the fact that you kind of gather before each one, I don't know if they did it at the last one, but they used to literally read out all the pairings, which was actually really good, because then there'd be a lot of jovial joking around about certain matchups and stuff. It's like, oh, I've got you. Ah. And there was a lot of kind of community in terms of how they go about doing their tournaments, which I think is, as you say, is like one of the highlights, and something that they seem to have kind of nailed really well that other tournaments seem to lack.
Yeah, but it just gives it something to sort of get excited about, and it's good to also, like I say, people just enjoy little mid-tournament updates. Not that anyone knows this anymore, because I don't think anyone hardly ever does it, but it's that thing where it's like just being told halfway through that, this faction is outperforming this faction, or whatever. It's like, if you're there as an Imperium player, you might like to hear that you are outperforming the two silly people that turned up with a Chaos army. Although, to be fair, Chaos now is actually a bit more robust with Thousand Suns and obviously Death Guard. But the point is like, yeah, it's you might have some sort of stake in it when you're going like, the Imperium faction is outperforming the Chaos faction this weekend. Yay us, or just, I don't know, just weird little things that people can get invested in. But there you go. Maybe I should take this advice on board, because I'm potentially doing some TOing at one of the upcoming 40k Brawl events. So maybe I need to take a page out of my own self-righteous book and start doing this kind of stuff myself going forwards. I imagine it's going to be a lot of work, but gosh darn it, I might give it a try. But yeah, I mean, yeah. And then I suppose here's right. So obviously, there's a few. There's one thing I want to get my head around, though, right? After this weekend, this is a talking point that I really want to dive into with you guys. After this weekend and the performance of the AdMech, as famously shown in the finals, and the nature of that victory, do we genuinely feel like 40k is a competitive game? Because my problem is at this moment in time it's like, don't get me wrong, like people spend a lot of time procrastinating over what's great and what's good. And obviously there's a lot of really awesome people out there who contribute to like the meta conversations and getting all hyped about, talking about all the different things that makes the game tick. But at the end of the day, right, yet again, we have another big final where a busted army smashes its opponent due to just utterly broken mechanics. Which to me tells me that the fact that we even pretend this game is competitive is a complete fallacy, because it's totally demonstrated to us every time that it's essentially not really a quest to find the best players or the best competitive, ideals in terms of I outplayed you. It's more a case of finding the most busted combos that just essentially delete people because of XYZ thing. And do we think that's competitive? And if we do think that's competitive, is that good? Because my frustration with it now is I'm looking at this game going, people are investing a lot of energy, a lot of money in being competitive in this thing, and I just think, what's the point? Because it's clearly demonstrated to me year on year that unless you happen to have stumbled across one of the most bent lists you could possibly find, it's just there's no play in it for you, right? Like, I mean, literally, what was it? Alec Harris got shot off in half a turn, and then went, okay, cool.
What I was going to say is he effectively conceded halfway through his opponent's first shooting phase.
Yeah,
and that's not like any kind of slight on the player. It's like it was quite clear the amount of damage that had been caused. It's like, well, that's you can't come back from that. And to your point, it's like, how competitive is that, or how truly like of being able to say that generalship or experience, like, because like watching that final game is like, well, it was just rubbish, really. It's not exciting. Like when I've watched streams of final games in other events before, even at one of the LBOs a few years ago when it was like broken list versus broken list, it went the distance, right? And you could see like, okay, how's this matchup gonna go? But when it's like over, even before the first turn's finished, it's like that doesn't seem like a great game to watch. And I don't know how often that occurred during the event. I do know there was lots of armies which lots of people who got 100 points in every single matchup. So I don't know if it was a regular occurrence of people just tabling or having their opponent concede quite early on. But that doesn't seem like that's not like to me like an interesting competitive thing to watch when it's like that.
Yeah, it's weird. It goes against sort of a whole design philosophy of 9th edition with having secondaries as well. Like, they've tried to make the game playable even if you have a bad matchup. Like, you can effectively score points by not killing. Like, that's meant to be the whole design philosophy around 9th. Yeah, I guess in instances like this, the best way to win is just to have something that can just shoot your opponent off the table as early as possible. And I imagine it's not a super fun game to either play or watch in those instances. I mean, because what was so Manny's the guy that won, right? And he just took
No. It was Malik.
And it was basically like 4 or 5 AdMech flyers. I remember seeing a bit of a screenshot of turn 1, and there was a bunch of flyers. I'm not sure how they get so much damage output on them. Is it just the bombs or something?
It wasn't even really the flyers that did it.
Oh, really?
They barely started shooting when he conceded.
Oh, right. Is it just
there's the thing? Is what Dan was referring to earlier. This
over Vanguard?
Was it the what? Was it? Well, it was June crawlers, wasn't it?
It's just I don't know enough about AdMech to know how it works. But it's like his units are just rolling loads of dice to hit and wound, and then fire destroy everything. So basically, Alex had a bunch of Redemptor dreadnoughts, and and he lost all 3 like halfway through the shooting phase, which was like a huge chunk of his army. So he was like, okay, I can't come back from that. It was just so much firepower on turn 1, to do that much damage.
I guess it's also like the 9th edition's become so much more lethal, and I think in general that's been a thing, and codex creep to an extent is making that a bit more obvious. But yeah, the sheer firepower of what you got now, even in comparison to 8th edition, it's gone up a lot more. And 8th edition, I think, is a power level higher than what you got in 6th and 7th edition. And I think it's one of the reasons why everyone constantly goes on about terrain being so important and having, line of sight blocking terrain, is because everything's so much more deadly. Like, you could have a really fun game of 6th and 7th edition with literally like 4 bits of terrain on the table. It's not super great, but it is functional, and you can have a game still that would go the distance of 5 rounds or 7 in the case of what it could go up to back in the day.
Yeah, I think this is the thing, though. It's like, to me, it's just not good for the game. It's just not good. It's not good for this ideology that this is a competitive game, because we constantly demonstrate it's not, because that isn't competitive gameplay mechanics. That is it's just a busted system, right? Like, every time the best players in the world.
I mean, do we need to clarify when we say competitive? Maybe I just, in my head, I think because when I think competitive, I think, say, Street Fighter or something like that, and like a fighting game tour or any kind of fighting game where you've got various different character roles you can play as with different styles, but they're all kind of balanced because they all have advantages and disadvantages, and they can match up each other well. What you're not seeing, or I'm at least not seeing, in the competitive 40k scene is it's just something's broken and overpowered, and that's what everyone kind of plays. It's not, you don't see as often this like different, each army doing really well in different hands and being able to do and coming together as like, any army should be able to beat any army, kind of.
I think that works on a non-competitive level. If you just take an average 40k army where you're not going in hard on what are super optimized points or power plays, like the blob of, was it 30 Skitarii Vanguards?
20 would be the max.
20, and then you combo on a bunch of buffs and a bunch of stratagems.
Yeah.
Like those are kind of really competitive, borderline broken stuff that sometimes they get fixed. And obviously that's the thing that comes out of the competitive tournament scene is, when Iron Hands was broken or the Castellan Knight was super overpowered, like those stuff get a nerf to make them less powerful, and it's a constant chase that Games Workshop is doing, where it's like they're just lowering down the power level of those things. And I think if you just played a standard game of 40k where you're not trying particularly hard to optimize your list in any way, then it probably is relatively balanced against your opponent, assuming they're doing the same thing. But I think that's really hard to pull off.
Yeah, but that there exposes one of the fundamental flaws of why it's not competitive, though, right? Because if you're telling me that me playing it in a casual form is the best way of achieving a competitive environment, it's like, this is the thing. I mean, to use Rich's example, top tier characters in fighting games are given multitudes of advantages over a percentage of the roster, but in the hands of skilled players, there are multitudes of instances where seemingly lesser characters have, outperformed the top tier characters played by some of the best players, because the matchup was such that they were able to sort of navigate and kind of manipulate the gameplay to result in a win, because that is, that there is that human element there. There is that psychology element that the player can make a difference. Alex Harris, God bless him, is a phenomenal 40k player. So much so he got all the way to the finals, but he didn't stand a chance. And that's the thing. It's like, literally, how something isn't right mechanically in this game that we should be so passionate about making it competitive. Or if we are passionate about making it competitive, there needs to be steps taken to try and address certain massive problems with it from a kind of balancing perspective. The fact is that a final of a major 40k tournament resulted in an opponent being the number 2 player of the LGT couldn't go half a shooting phase. It's just a bad look. The whole thing, it just diminishes what this is supposed to be. And again, Games Workshop can obviously come in with fixes, and they can try and stop certain aspects of this build from being optimized. But the fact of the matter is already there are at least tens of people out there right now, maybe even hundreds, who saw that performance and are out there buying those AdMech models right now and are building those models right now. And you're going to see those tearing it up at local events until they get nerfed into oblivion. And it's just that cycle. And all I'm saying is it's just a weird thing, because I think, again, I just find myself in a situation where I love going to tournaments. I love playing 40k. I like the idea of it being competitive. I want it to be competitive. But I just see no evidence that supports that statement. It just never. It always falls on its face when it gets the chance to show itself at its highest level.
It's one of those ongoing arguments that you see where people will say, "Oh, this player maybe isn't that good. They're just playing a great list," or "This list is broken." And people are like, no, it's not the army that's broken. They're just the best players all playing it because they know there's something great about it. It's there's always like an odd justification as to why the same people are always winning. And so, yeah, they are the best players, obviously, but also they're all leaning into and have the ability to build and play a certain army style that they're effectively not manipulating the rules, but they found them, like, edge case examples of rules that they can that are effectively broken, and they're abusing those while they still exist until they get taken out the game. I think there is something to be said, like, are the people that are winning the only people that have the ability to not only find a list that is really good, but also build and paint it to a tabletop, to a tournament standard in time for an event? And who's got the willingness to do that? Obviously, some people do 40k for a living now, whether because they work in a shop, they're sponsored in some fashion, they've got coaching services, they've got a YouTube channel, they've got some, or maybe they've got all of them in some cases, which can fund as a business their ability to purchase and paint armies or have armies painted for them. And I guess in addition to that, they might be playtesters where they have early access to these rules to potentially see these combinations of rules before a normal player of 40k has access to. So, sometimes maybe it isn't necessarily you're the best player, it's just you're the person that's willing to do all of these things to actually win a game. And most people, I don't think, want to buy 6 AdMech flyers just to win a game once, and then afterwards those flyers will no longer be as good because Games Workshop will come in and nerf them somewhat, and then they've got to start that whole cycle again. Let's find the next broken rules, broken army. Let's buy and spam all of these models and get them painted up to a slightly rubbish standard that I'm then going to sell in 3 months' time. So like, most people don't have that willpower to do it, and if they do, they do it once or twice, get burnt. Because there's always people complaining every time a nerf comes through, like, I bought all of these things. And it's like, did you not realize that this is going to happen because it happens every time. But I guess new players maybe don't, and they get swept up in the whole competitive scene that they want to gun for those top spots.
And this is the thing, I don't want to take anything away from the guys that are the best players, because they are the best players, right? Like, they are the best players because they are able to find these lists, and they are able to, to do what it takes to put them on the tabletop in a timely fashion. And, that deserves a good level of praise. I don't want to take anything away from, the people who have deservedly earned the accolade of being the best 40k players. There's no sour grapes or or kind of desire for me to try and take that away from them. All I'm saying is that, again, it just has that thing about it where it's like, the more and more I play 40k 9th edition, the more I understand the aspiration for them to make it, quote, competitive, the more I pick holes in it. Because 40k just never has been that game. It's just been janky every time. But people love it, so they want to see who's better at it. And there are, objective facts around people who are better at 40k than other people. I would argue that I am a good player of 40k. I would argue in some instances I have a skill set that allows me to perform better in games than others. However, I'm limited by how much I'm willing to buy or pursue these things. And I'm also limited by the fact that, as you said, Phil, like, I'm just not in the know. I'm not a play tester. I'm not someone who gets early access to this stuff. I'm just a guy who does this, podcast thing and loves the hobby and has a bunch of different models built up over years. And I just chuck stuff together and see how it goes. And that's what
I mean, arguably, the best way to determine who the best player is via the best in faction. Because a knight player versus another knight player, not against each other, but in their overall score, the end of the tournament season, they have the same opportunities as another player of their same faction to win their games. And whether that army is good or not, it doesn't actually matter, because those people against people of their same faction are on an equal footing, whether their rules are good or not. But then when you try and apply overall, it's like, well, the person who owns the AdMech army is the winner because AdMech just so happened to be the current top tier army. It's like, then everyone piles onto AdMech. So it isn't balanced in that respect. But if you were to look at an individual's faction and rank people by faction, then you get a bit more of a, well, who's the best out of those factions. I think that's a more interesting way of seeing how well someone can do.
Yeah,
I think there's definitely an element of, like, the player does it's not just about having the best army or the best list or anything. Being it can't be by entirely coincidence that there's lots of that often big tournaments at the kind of the top players. You see familiar names, and it's probably because they put in more time or effort. It's more important to them, and that's what they dedicate themselves to being really good at. Because while Malik won with Adeptus Mechanicus, there's lots of Adeptus Mechanicus players who didn't even there's probably plenty of Mechanicus players who went to that tournament who didn't win loads of games.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's loads of people that like totally net listed the army and didn't do very well at it because they don't play the game as well. They don't actually know how the list works, or they don't have a practice with it. And as you say, yeah, not to say the people that are winning aren't good, because obviously they are, but they're leaning into the ability to take an army that is better than other people. But obviously they've also got the talent and skill to play that army as well, and they've practicing it and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean they possess a fundamental understanding of the systems, and this is the thing, right? I have no doubt they looked at everything. They looked at the terrain setup. They probably had it set up at home, and they were, trying to work out, right, what, in this, this is the thing. The reason why I don't have it in me anymore to be one of the best players or to aspire to be one of the best players is because I can't be bothered to do that much work. That's the difference. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work, as they say, or whatever it is. But or when talent doesn't work hard, I think is the whole statement. But and that's the thing. The guys who are winning work real hard to be winning, and I don't want to sort of diminish their accomplishments by suggesting that, you know, it was easy because they just happened to write the right list. That isn't true. But again, I just think 40K systematically or you know, mechanically has a lot of flaws in it that prevents competitiveness. You know, bolt action is a much more competitive gaming system in the sense that it's much more balanced and it's much more you know, mechanically constructed to create more balanced gameplay experiences or more competitive experiences, because there are mechanics in the game that make the flow of gameplay work in such a way as it can be more competitive. It's much more about strategy and less about the list building. 40K is so much more list building, but then there's also the little details. It's researching the terrain, it's figuring out, you know, the optimal distances, it's, you know, sketching out all your different deployment setups that you're going to optimize around. And, you know, again, it's the ability to think multiple turns in advance, like what is the strategy that supports these actions, so on and so forth. So I know there's more to it than that, but it's just I don't know, so many instances in this game where it just sort of shows itself to be just a bit bonkers, and that's fine because I love it that way. I've never really cared that it is that way. I love it for what it is, but it's, you know, it's a lot of things, but I struggle to agree with the statement that it's truly competitive. That's all I'm getting at.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, there you go. Richie, closing thoughts on it all for you though, buddy. What do you reckon? The LGT, how was it in your opinion?
In my opinion, looking at it from a purely monetary perspective, I just actually looked up to see how much we cost, because I was buying the tickets ages ago. It costs for the doubles event. It costs us 30 quid
between the two of you, or 30 quid each
for the whole ticket. So between the two of us,
15 quid a head.
15 quid a head, or put it another way, £10 per game of Warhammer. And in that sense, from my and this is just my from my perspective, I may have money to burn, and other people disagree. But to go somewhere and play to have 3 games of Warhammer, 3 very different armies at a professional level, in a competitive sense, that's quite a good deal, I think. There's really a rock up and there's a table. All I had to bring was some my own painted models and dice and some other games to play. I think that was really good. I think that's not I won't say bargain. It was definitely good. I felt good value for that, and it was nice being able to play a few, play some games against armies I haven't played before. Players I've not met before, and to hang out with Phil and some banter.
Yeah,
that's awesome, man.
I mean, to put it in context, I think the Warhammer World doubles is maybe 60, 70 quid. Obviously, that's a 2-day, includes lunch as well. So yeah, for 30 quid, that's pretty good value, I think.
Yeah.
And what was your summary thoughts on the actual event itself, though, Phil? You were pretty happy with it? You're going to go again next year?
I was really happy with the doubles, actually. I was sort of pleasantly surprised, considering I always, not poo-poo events like this, but I'm a bit of a Warhammer World lovey. It's like that's where my heart really is. So
Nottingham,
other events,
Gibraltar, or bust is basically.
Basically, yeah. Other events I've always been a bit not very fussed about, but I do like a doubles event, and I don't know if I'm slightly. I'm viewing it through the tinted glasses of not having played 40k very much this year. In fact, the only other game of 40k I've played the whole year is our RFW doubles event that we did on the Rapid Fire Wargaming channel with Dan. So I haven't played much 40k. So the fact that I got to play 40k, got to hang out with Richie, who I don't think I've seen all year because of lockdown and stuff. So that was great as well. Got to hang out with you as well, Dan, and stuff. So just that sort of social element made it good. The games and the opponents were all good, I would say. Does it matter if you're a bit squashed together or the terrain, while functional, isn't pretty? No, I mean, it could be nicer, but it sort of is what it is in terms of it's a large-scale tournament event. It's not like a small bespoke local or Warhammer World or, a no retreat. It's like I know what I'm getting into when I'm going there. I'm kind of glad I didn't go to the singles. I think I possibly would have hated that in terms of the scale and the size and a bit more of the stress. Like, I've got to set up tables, got to move my army in amongst these, tiny little tables, with 600 to 800 people to find my spot, stuff like that. I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, scoring is always like, I'm using the ITC app, and it's just confusing as hell. I just, maybe because of not having the practice of having used it all that much. So yeah, I absolutely hate having to like log your score. And I think there's several times in the games I was double checking with my opponent to make sure that we'd both done it correctly. So yeah, doubles is fun. Singles, maybe not so much. But overall, it was really good, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I echo the sentiment, though. I think I really regret the fact that I wasn't able to do the doubles, even though I could have probably got a ticket for it if I'd really pushed for it. But it was a case of who was I going to double up with? I mean, again, I could probably found someone. Joe might have done it, although Joe's been down with the sickness the last few days. Not COVID, as far as I'm aware. I think he's got that cold that's doing the rounds. But yeah, like I think. I regret not doing the doubles. It looked like a really fun time, so I wish I'd gotten involved with that. The singles event was fantastic though, but again, as I said, it just had that sort of weird disconnect in terms of the sense of community around it. It was very, it was fine. I got to spend the weekend with people that I like, and I enjoyed myself overall. All of my opponents were fantastic, and we'll have either have talked about that before or talk about that later. But the point is that I think it was pretty good. I think my only criticism of the event is that it just needs a little bit more pomp and circumstance built into it. It needs a little bit more theatre, and that's about it, really. I think next year, if I do go back, there's a real temptation in my mind to do the doubles on the Friday and then to play in the Age of Sigmar singles, because that looked like a great time, Age of Sigmar.
Oh.
Well, just because the Age of Sigmar stuff was just chilled out. It was like at the top, so few people by comparison. Like, it was much less attended. And it just, it's just Age of Sigmar, and it's just sort of, it's a game that you can just sort of get into and just sort of have a fun time with. And most of the Age of Sigmar crowd are good people. So it's not that the 40k crowd isn't, it's just a different vibe. So yeah, I don't know. I will go back next year for sure. But in what capacity will be TBD. But yeah.
I think I was just going to say, one of my friends, Tim, who I haven't seen in ages. I met him several years ago at No Retreat. And he came down from, I think, York somewhere for the event. He was in the Song of Fire and Ice tournament. He absolutely loved it. He had a stunning painted army. I think Duncan Rhodes was playing in it and also judging the painting competition. And I do believe Tim came away with like best army award.
Well done, Tim.
So he did well. Had a bunch of swag, and I think he really enjoyed that event. So yeah, maybe some of the smaller game systems is the way to go for these kind of events.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you as well, though. After having only done like 1-day tournaments since going back, like I definitely need to work on my physical fitness if I'm going to start returning to more regular 2-day tournaments. I am not as young as I used to be, and I'm not as the toll that the weekend takes on you is much more real.
I mean, I did the singles, and as Adam knows, I'm lean, and my legs were just killing me by the end. Like just being stood up for a day is a lot of effort. There's a lot of pain. I had sore feet.
Yeah.
On that night.
Yeah, like I've definitely been run down. I should have taken the Monday off is the thing I should have done, but yeah, I'm definitely feeling still quite run down right now. So that's something to take stock of. But I don't think I treated myself very well at the event. Like I probably didn't drink enough water, and I definitely didn't like eat enough. Like you need like to consistently I think like for those kind of things you want to bring like fruits and things that you can just sort of consistently eat to sort of keep you going.
You definitely need some snacks. So I sort of struggled. So I think between each game we had, I think, half an hour between maybe one game and like 15 minutes between the other, in which to like on one of them you need to like grab your food, eat it, get back to your table, set up your table, stuff like that. So there wasn't a lot of time between games, which I think is one of the downsides of the event. I took a water bottle because they were like, it's a sports stadium, there's loads of water filling stations. So I found one. So that was a bit of a struggle. There was also a vending machine, which just didn't seem to work for me. So otherwise, I would have bought some.
There was a
more
vending
snacks.
machine?
That was, yeah, near the entrance.
Yeah, by the entrance. And yeah, there were toilets, and they'd sort of taken over the ladies' toilets because obviously the majority of gamers are gentlemen. I sort of dread to think what the queues might have been like on the weekend when there was way more people there.
Oh, it was all right. It
for
was
those
fine.
singles events.
It was fine.
Oh, that's good.
The queue for the food, they had a bit of an issue with the food situation. Surprisingly, Phil, you mocked me before. You were like, Dan, you've got to order your food beforehand. It was like, nah, I'll just deliver you everything. And that's what I did. And it was so much easier.
Did Deliveroo?
Yeah, it was so much easier.
No, man.
It was so much easier.
Because I'd seen, so on the Friday, they basically was like, there's a catering tent if you pre-ordered. There's a van for food. And they were like, we're doing this because none of you took the advantage to pre-order the food for the whole system. So we do this as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the queues for those would have been like on the weekend.
Me and Adam and Simon, we just walked to Greg's as well. That was easy. Just fine.
No. Nice.
But that's the thing, like, it was, I think that's it. It was perfectly fine. But yeah, no, I look forward to next year. Yeah, overall, I mean, I do recommend it. I think it's worth going along to. But yeah, I don't know. I try not to go with too much of a try hard attitude as such, even though obviously it's a big tournament, but the likelihood of you getting into that kind of winning situation is so slim that you sort of just want to approach it with an attitude of you're just trying to have fun with it and that you're just trying to see what you get out of it, which is what I did. My army should not have won half the games that I won, but it was, I was lucky with some dice rolls and things worked out. But I had zero aspirations of going 5-0. I mean, I didn't really think I'd go 3-2. So yeah, no, I think that really helped me though, because it just made me just approach every game with just a devil may care kind of attitude. And I just didn't mind. So yeah, it was all good.
We used to say that when we used to go to Warhammer World events, that if you lost your first game, it made the whole rest of the weekend so much more easy.
Oh yeah, God, it was the best.
Because then there's no pressure then.
Yes. Yeah. And and even though I won my first game, I just sort of approached the rest of the weekend with like zero pressure. Even, day one, I finished 3 wins, 0 losses. And I was thinking, and, people were like, oh, go on, mate, you're going to go the distance. I was like, no, I'm not. My army should not have gone 3-0. This is madness. Like, I'm going to get absolutely trounced in game 4, sorry. But we'll talk about that in another segment rather than getting into it here. Cool. All right. Well, there we go. The LGT. It was a thing. We went to it. This is broadly what we thought about it, and also the general state of competitive 40K. Yeah, it's a huge gaming event. It lives up to the moniker. It's pretty impressive for what it is. So yeah, looking forward to doing it all again this time next year, I guess. And maybe one of you lads will join me in the singles, eh? Ooh. Stand beside me.
No, I'll wait and see if I get a decent codex or not.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, we'll wait.
Hold out.
We'll wait and see. All right. Well, we'll move on to whatever it is that comes next. Transitional noise. Woo! All right, then. We're going to talk about Phil and Richie's doubles. So, Phil, Richie, what did you take on their doubles?
Well, Richard's will be the quicker to go through, so I'll let him start.
I thought we could go me second to see what else. Okay, because I'll go first then. I took so we each had to take 1,000 points. 2 separate 1,000.
Did you have your own warlord?
I did have my own warlord. Yeah. So
your
own
own
warlord,
CP?
own CP.
Ooh.
Couldn't use stratagems across the armies, even if you shared keywords.
Auras?
Nope.
No. Transports, no. Anything like that.
So you're basically 2 separate things smashed together.
Yeah,
Like a
So-
pineapple pen.
You love that. You love that one.
It's a classic reference.
Pineapple pen. So for my 1,000 points, I decided to adapt my current Red Scorpions list, and I thought it'd be very simple and straightforward. And I'll just take a Vanguard detachment of dreadnoughts, and that was my army. It was very handy, very easy to move.
Solid
as well.
plan.
It was easy to move from table to table as well because I could fit all the models on my dice box. So
How many models were in your force?
5. I had 5 models.
Wow.
That was my arm. That was my 1,000 points. It was so to crib for my Red Scorpions list I've got at the minute, which is the Warlord. No, my Warlord. I'll come on to Warlord actually. So I had my HQ choice. So was Carib Cullen the Risen. Stalwart. You have to. I mean, I basically was like, if he's my character, okay, how can I build a dreadnoughts around him? So then I had Carib Cullen the Risen, a Leviathan dreadnought with Gravlux Bombard and a Siege Drill and 3 Hunter Killer missiles and twin Volkites. Then I had 2 Contemptor dreadnoughts with multi-melters and combat weapons and Stormbolters, and a Redemptor dreadnought with the Gatling cannon, the Macro Plasma Accelerator, Frag Storm Grenade launchers, and Icarus Missile Launcher, and he was my Warlord because I took these guys as Iron Hand's successors. Because if you're taking dreadnoughts, you might as well. Unless, of course, you're Alex Harrison, who he takes them as Death Watch. But I took them as Iron Hand successors, so they all had... They have double the wounds in terms of degrading profiles. Everything has 6 up, feel no pain. And I made the Redemptor Dreadnought a Warlord, so I could give him the Warlord trait of 5 up, feel no pain. Because that's the weak link in the list was as the Redemptor didn't have an in-run. So I was like, okay, I'll give him the 5 up, feel no pain, so he can survive a bit longer as well. So that's what I had. 5 dreadnoughts to kind of stomp across the board. Was my contribution to our doubles list.
And you went with the regular Contemptors rather than the relics because you wanted to preserve what little CP you had, I assume.
Yes, because I only had 1 CP because I had to spend 3 CP to take them as a Vanguard, so that got my 6 to 3. I then spent another CP then I spent a CP to make my Redemptor a Warlord.
Yep.
And then I've just realised I conned myself out of CP. I start with 2 CP, not 1.
No. Did you not take an extra Warlord trait or relic or anything?
No, because I make I give 1 Warlord trait to the Redemptor. So I had a spare CP that whole time.
No.
And I was giving you rubbish for getting your Warlord trait wrong.
No. Yeah.
There you go. No one's perfect, mate. But
it's because I usually make the Leviathan. Oh no, it's because I had the Leviathan. I didn't know one.
yeah, because that's 1 CP for a Leviathan.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
So I did only have 1 CP at the start because I also had I lost 1 for the Leviathan. And
I presume Cullen doesn't, even though he's a Leviathan, doesn't have a 1 CP tax.
He's not a relic. He's a modern Leviathan.
Oh.
Well,
that's true actually. Yeah.
He's just a HQ slot. So if you want to have your full Dreadnought list, he's one of your options available to you from the lovely chaps at Forge World.
Yeah.
But you're going for the regular Contemptors mostly because they're cheaper, literally and figuratively, than the relics. They don't have the CP cost, but I just like the flexibility. I like all my Dreadnoughts have a close combat weapon. I want to be able to punch things if I need to, and they often do, and it's often very helpful. That was. I know. Whereas lots of other people like to have a Dreadnought, either a Leviathan or Contemptor, give it full of nothing but guns. I always like to have the flexibility of being able to be good in combat as well.
And there was no temptation to maybe drop one of those Contemptors for some extra bodies. I mean, it feels to me like a Tech Marine and some Servitors might have not gone amiss.
It could. I mean, it would have been very helpful. I mean, I could have dropped one of the Contemptors and chucked in a Tech Marine or a Librarian or something else to kind of buff the what I had. But I thought, no, this is just a bit of fun. This double event. Yeah. So it's a bit of fun. So I'll take loads of Dreadnoughts. No, but I just wanted to mostly just say, let's just have Dreadnoughts, and just keep the buffing shenanigans to a minimum. Was the idea behind it.
Were you, because obviously Cullen is able to give the reroll 1s to hit Captain Aura. Were you utilizing the old Wisdom of the Ancients thing on a regular basis to maybe give yourself the Lieutenant buff, or was that not really anything you were overly worried about throughout the proceedings?
traditionally, I would do that. However, when you start the game with 1 CP, you're quite
That is
limited on
true.
what you can do with it. And
No, that's fair enough.
I'd usually want to save that just in case I had, because I usually try and save that just in case a Cullum got into combat and died, so I could use only in Death Does Duty End, or another, or for Deny the Witch stratagem, or my personal favorite, which you get access to the Iron Hands, is I forget what it's called. I forget the name of it, but it's the one where all sixes you pick one unit and then you target everything at another unit.
Yeah.
And every 6 to wound counts as 2 wounds. Or you could,
merciless logic or whatever.
No,
that's a warlord trait.
I think it's like I forget what it's. I think it's methodical firepower, maybe. But
something
yeah,
like that.
it's a cool with me. It's good for saying this dreadnought's going to shoot at that unit or that thing, and every wound of a 6 counts as double wounds. Counts as an additional wound, and that's a handy thing to have.
You did the Overwatch on a 5-up a couple of times as well, which was useful.
That's the other good one. If you have 2 CP, you can do 1 CP for Overwatch and another CP to have Overwatch on 4s, which is amazing because it's like you charge my dreadnought and I'm going to shoot you. And there's a couple of occasions where that proved particularly helpful.
And you went Inheritors of the Primarch, right? So you were basically an Iron Hand army with a Red Scorpions HQ. But
Basically,
painted
yeah.
all Red Scorpions.
Yeah, it's all painted Red Scorpions.
It's the Red Scorpion successor, basically.
Yeah, and when I take it as a bigger force, it becomes slightly problematic. It becomes slightly more expensive because the relics are more expensive when you are a successor chapter. But when you're just taking dreadnoughts, you can't take relics anyway, so it wasn't a problem.
No, that's certainly true. Which again, though, it would add to the whole point about maybe there's some, some argument for some kind of tech marine contingency.
No,
or something
no optimization needed. Just dreadnought.
No optimization, just dreadnought. I need no relics.
There you go.
They don't have Iron Hands or Marines don't have any dreadnought. I suppose because there's no dreadnought characters, are there? So yeah, no, they wouldn't do it. You weren't tempted to chuck in an Invictus war suit?
I don't have one.
Oh, that'll be the part of the problem.
So that would have been.
It's not a dreadnought, though, is it?
It's not really a dreadnought. No, it's a bloke in a bloke in a suit.
Well, isn't that what a Contemptor is, though?
But he's a dead bloke.
Yeah,
is he? Or near dead? Near dead bloke.
Because I thought the Dreadnought Sarcophagus ones were the dead guy ones, but I felt like the Contemptors were just like bigger suits of armor for some reason.
No, I think they're all entombed, like semi-deads, just about to. They're like mini emperors.
Mini emperors?
Well, because they're near dead, but kept alive via stuff.
Even in death, they still serve.
Ain't that the truth? So go on then, Phil. Complimenting this fabulous selection of, Red Scorpions. What did you bring to the table?
Oh, I had managed to actually paint up all my models.
Unbelievable.
Managed to do it this time, which I was quite pleased about. So I was going for my Minotaurs. Ran through the list last week, but I had tweaked it very slightly. So Minotaurs going as White Scar successors, rather than going for Inheritors of the Primarch, because that doesn't really optimize for any of my models that I'm taking, because I'm just taking a list of the stuff I have painted as opposed to any kind of tactical nuance and being able to pick from a selection of models. It's literally, what have I got painted? Oh, okay, this is what I'm taking. So I went with Whirlwind of Rage, which is 6+ to hit in combat, gives you an extra hit, which would have been useful if I could roll any 6s, which basically didn't happen very much. And then the other one was Tactical Withdrawal, because Whirlwind of Rage only works on the turn that you charge. Tactical Withdrawal allows you to fall back and then charge again. So I thought those two would go quite well together. Went with Chapter Master, Jump Pack, Thunderhammer, Storm Shield. Gave him a Relic Thunderhammer, so it does +1 damage. White Scars do another +1 damage when they're in the Assault Doctrine. So I could have had up to 5 damage on my Thunderhammer. I didn't.
Just to clarify for the listeners, you mean Master Crafted Thunderhammer?
Oh, sorry. Thunderhammer. Yes, it's a relic that makes it Master Crafted. Yeah. I gave him 2 abilities, 2 Warlord traits. One of them was a White Scar specific one, which basically, I think it's, I want to say Hunter's Instincts, but I could be wrong about that. It's basically +1 to hit and +1 to wound against monsters and vehicles. Then the other one was Imperium Sword, which is +1 attack, +1 strength on the charge, and the thing I completely forgot about, which is reroll charges, which
I mean, that's almost like the main reason why you take that Wall of Trade.
Yeah.
When did we find out that's what it did?
I think it was like in the third game, or was it after the third game or in the third game? I think it was in.
It was during the third game.
Yeah, so it would have been really useful in the first game, especially. Would have also been useful in the second game as well, but I actually did use a CP reroll that time and failed, so it wouldn't have made any difference. But it would have saved me a CP. Also took a lieutenant with the Burning Blade. Took 3 intercessor squads. 2 of them are 5-man squads. One of them is a 6-man squad because I just had the points. In fact, I didn't even do that deliberately. I think it was accidentally left like that, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm taking an extra model." All of them have grenade launchers, which were quite cool and useful in the game. Regular bolt rifles as well. Took an Inceptor squad. This is the slight tweak that I made. I made one a 5-man bolter squad, as opposed to 2 3-man squads, and then I had a 3-man plasma squad as well. And then that was my 1,000 points on the nose list.
Good times, pal. Good times. I mean, to be fair to you, like the combination of your infantry heavy, mobile jump troops and Richie's heavy armor, it sounds like a perfectly, competent combination,
In hindsight, I think it actually worked quite well. There was a lot of synergy. Richard had the anvil and most of the hammer, to be fair, and I had
the noodle arms.
I had the stuff that could win the game in terms of I've got stuff that can just sit on objectives. And
nice, old reliable.
So basically, it tends to be most games. My 3 intercessor squads weren't really doing much. They were sat on objectives, sometimes shooting at stuff, but not often in certain games anyway. The interceptors could jump about and do stuff. The Smash Captain could deep strike with another squad. And then Richard's stuff would just be there to be shot at and actually do most of the damage dealing and most of the damage taking. So actually, I think in that respect, for a doubles army, worked really well. Obviously, we haven't played a test game or anything like that. We didn't really think too hard about the lists, as Richard said. It was just a sort of fun list that we thought, oh, this will work, and I think it did actually overall.
I mean, to be fair, I think you're thinking mostly of the final game because your intercessors did more than just sit on objectives. They were getting stuck in games 1 and 2.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah. Game 1, I did a bit more of a Hail Mary with some of my... that's because the mission's objectives were in the mid-board, so they actually had somewhere to go.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a perfectly reasonable synergy. And the thing is, you find, and this is certainly a process that I've experienced with playing in a lot of doubles events over the years, is that you start to realize what the synergies are as the games go on. And about by the time you get to kind of game 3 of a tournament, you start to feel like you've really kind of figured it out. The only problem is sometimes by that point you've already lost. So you're then trying to kind of claw back, your performance in day 2 or what have you. But obviously in your case, you guys were, only doing the one dayer. But do you think this is an idea or a synergy that you would seek to develop, or do you think this is a fun one-off experiment? There's not much there to sort of explore. Do you think with a little bit of extra work there could be something really quite strong here to take advantage of?
I think so. I think there are definitely some optimizations of what we got. I mean, in a manner of speaking, my 2,000 points Red Scorpions is 75% of what we took, because even when I take 2,000 points, I've got Intercessor and I've got Intercessor and Inceptors. But it was cool using some models I would not usually touch with a barge ball because I personally think they're rubbish. But Phil was like, no, let's try these out. And so it was the Chapter Master and the Plasma Inceptors, which ones I don't normally like those at all. But Phil was keen to bring them, so it was great to be able to test them out on the battlefield and see how they would perform.
Yeah, they actually did I mean, the captain overall performed abysmally because we deep struck him down in 2 games and he just failed his charges both times. The time he did well was in the last game where I kept him on the board turn 1, but actually the threat of them was really useful. So game 1 and game 2, they both deployed and kept units back, sort of deliberately to try and screen those 2 units out. But because we also went for, I think, behind enemy lines in the first game, so scoring in their deployment zone, went for engage on all fronts, I think, for the second and third games. And because of that, they then kept a lot of their really good units back in both games, which actually probably helped us out quite a bit. So there's more of a threat of them was more efficient than what they actually did.
Yeah, they were basically keeping their armies back in their deployment zones because they didn't want a smash captain appear in there, which in game 2 was totally the intent. We didn't want them to be. We wanted them to be holding back a bit, and they did, and that's exactly what they did. Because I remember Phil was saying, "Where should we deep strike?" And it's like it doesn't matter. The whole point is that they will be worried about it, so they will keep all their stuff back in their deployment zone. So then we could move forward and capture more of the objectives. Yeah. And it worked.
Yeah. Game 3, we're up against 2 Chaos guys, and they were just charging on into the centre, like not caring too much about the objectives that they've got in their deployment zone.
Yeah, because I joined you when you were playing those guys, and they look like good fun. They look like a good, proper, fun old game.
Well, yeah, that was a fun one. To jump around talking about that game, that was quite fun because, or fun in air quotes, it was fun, but we got there. One of the players was there, and the terrain hadn't been set up, so I was like, "Oh, what's going on here?" And shortly after speaking to him, he was like, my mate's really drunk, and he's gone off somewhere. I'm not too sure if he wants to play this game or not." So he was like, "So we'll wait and see." And eventually he turned up with some food in hand, and it was okay. He was up for he was up for gaming.
And that game was a very we can do it all. We can just jump to this, but that game, as we're talking about that one already, that for me, I thought that game was great fun. I know Phil, you had a different opinion because your units weren't involved in the fight, partly because you forgot that you had your Inceptors in reserve. But it was so playing against those guys. They had, I want to say, 6 rhinos. Or 4
I think
rhinos?
It's 4. They had two
yeah.
each. One of them had 2 demon princes and a spawn. The other one had 1 demon prince, a spawn, Calm the Betrayer, and some other character, I think.
And each rhino was full of 10 Khorne berserkers,
which are deceptively bothersome sometimes, aren't they? They do a lot of hitting.
Oh, the other character was the Exalted Champion.
Oh, that was it. Yeah.
And this was on that weird deployment one where you've got the deployment zones aren't. It's like the 2 quarters and then there's the dead zone and the circle in the middle.
So it was the mission 32, which is sweep and clear, with the table quarters.
Yeah,
I thought it was great fun because we went first, and I just moved my dreadnought. It was just the last game, so I was like, let's just have some fun. So I just moved all my dreadnoughts into the middle of the board, and then he responded by charging them with about 30 Khorne berserkers and 3 demon princes. And then he rolled. It was like seeing like an Eldar player back in the day, just rolling dice forever. Like I can hit I'm re-rolling all my hits and I'm re-rolling all my wounds, and I'm like slowly turning my wound markers down.
Yeah, that was a long old turn. I remember at that point Tim came over and said hello to me. Canadian Tim, not our lookout sir Tim. And I was just chatting with him for about half an hour. You lot were rolling dice and doing stuff, and I was just occasionally looking over, going, "Oh, okay, stuff's happening." Because I didn't have too much to do first turn. And then, second turn, I was meant to be deep striking my, I think, Plasma Inceptors and... was it both squads of Inceptors?
Yeah, you put both the Inceptors in reserve that time.
And so turn 2, forgot about them. And then by turn 3, they had effectively conceded. So it was wasn't needed for them to come down, because they were like, oh, they come down and basically finish off what was left on the table.
Well, I think it was turn 3 or turn 2, end of turn 2, was it, or beginning of turn 3? Basically, the middle of the battlefield must have had like 40 dead Khorne berserkers, 3 dead demon princes, and 4 dead dreadnoughts and 1 battered dreadnought.
Yeah, that was the end of turn 2, because turn 2 I managed to so my Smash Captain killed Khan for Betrayer, which is his one thing that he did all tournament of note, basically.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like, I mean, and again, the army was fabulous as well. Like, I love the fact that they were sporting all these old, like, metal demon prints and, like, Greater Demon of Khorne.
It was true old Hammer stuff. Then.
Yeah, so one of them, I think his name was his name was Morgan. I think his Instagram's Morgan Oldhammer, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so his half of the army was this immaculately painted, old school, effectively like Rogue Trader era chaos army. And I think he had a rule which was, I think it's like nothing after 93 or something in terms of what his army was made of. So for the inventory, he had like base extenders to make it compatible. And then for all the demon princes, I think they were like super old Bloodthirster minis, and they were all on like square bases. And then the Chaos Spawn was a model that had like these old tracked wheels for it, which I can't remember what it even would have been back in those days. I suspect potentially fantasy miniatures as much as 40k miniatures, as is the way with a lot of demon models even now.
Yeah, I just looked him up while you were going through that. He's called Old Hammer Morgan.
Oh, Old Hammer Morgan
Is the Insta.
And I remember he had an old Blood Slaughterer of Khorne on is that wheeled demon thing that he called Keith.
Oh yeah, Keith for Chaos Spawn. That was it.
Keith, and he used him as Chaos Spawn.
Yeah, he's got a post for the Chaos Spawn here. He just finished the Goo Feast, Angriest Boy on Wheels. Okay, there you go. It's apparently a Realm of Chaos era Blood Slaughterer of Khorne.
Yeah, very cool.
And he's called him Keith. Yeah, gorgeous. I mean, again, that is one of the things that obviously when I saw the doubles, immediately I was like, oh, that looks really compelling, because when you see stuff like that with people rocking like, proper retro old school Chaos Space Marines, it's just like, oh man, that is pretty. So yeah, I was slightly envious seeing you guys playing against that, because it just sort of brought back a lot of very sort of prominent sort of old school memories of the game as it was. It's amazing when you look at those old minis, though, how much everything's scaled up since, obviously. I mean, it's astonishing how much smaller and compact it all was back then. It's crazy.
Yeah,
love it.
Well, because I guess back in those days, I think it was, the manufacturing costs are done on the weight of the metal. So the smaller the mini, the more cost effective it is. And with plastic, that's less of an issue.
Yeah.
It was a gorgeous army, and I thought it was great. It was a great fun, from my perspective at least, great fun way to have a big clash of just a big scrap in the middle of the battlefield. I thought it was a great fun, not taking itself too seriously ending.
Yeah.
To the event.
No, that was pretty good. So the final score, because I managed to keep track of what those were. It was 69 to us and 39 to Morgan and Drunk Co.
Fabulous. Well, that's how you ended. How did you start?
So the first game was an Iron Hands doubles list, which was one person's army, sort of split into two. Well, it was split into two. But basically his friend had come over from Ireland. I think not specifically for the LGT, but was just also on holiday here around this time. So they decided to do the event. So rather than him lugging his own army across, he basically decided to sort of borrow his mate's army. Can you remember what was in his list? I remember there was a lot of dreadnoughts. It was almost not quite a mirror match, but there was a lot of similarities.
It was mirror match in that it was iron. In that they had Iron Hands, and I had Iron Hands dreadnoughts. No, they had two detachments. One of them had Iron Father Feros and a just a Primaris Librarian. And with them, he had a Leviathan Dreadnought with 2 Storm Cannons, a Contemptor Dreadnought with the Twin Volkites, and I want to say an Intercessor Squad and an Impulsor. Then the second detachment was a captain, I think it was a captain and lieutenant, some assault intercessor, a couple of assault intercessor squads, 2 Redemptor Dreadnoughts, and I think there was a chaplain on a bike. No, the chaplain on a bike was the next game.
Yeah. But there was also Blade Guard as well.
Blade Guard, that was it. There was Blade Guard.
And did you talk about
and a lieutenant?
What are the? I can always forget. Not Eradicators. The Primaris Scout Sniper units.
The Eliminators. How can we forget the Eliminators?
Yes,
because they cost us the game.
Basically,
because
they managed to deploy on the middle objective. Basically, so the first game I believe it was Battle Lines. So it's like Dawn of War. No, not Dawn of War. Long Ways style deployment.
What was that? Hammer
and Anvil.
Hammer and
Anvil,
yeah.
So they managed to deploy the Eliminators on an objective right away, and it was obviously in a building that's L-shaped that completely blocks line of sight. So basically, to be able to interact with them and shoot them, we had to get past to the other side of the wall. So it just made it really difficult to actually shift them, and then they're in cover and get like +2 to their save in addition to their cover save. So they're on like a sort of like 1-up save by default. So yeah, they were pretty difficult to shift. I think we killed all but one in the end. But yeah, they were still on it, which is quite annoying.
Credit to our opponents. I think Declan was one of them, and I can't remember the other guy's name. But they stopped. Basically, those Eliminators were such a way, as you said, that they were on the objective. We couldn't sit. We had no line of sight to them. We had multiple infantry units. None of them were mine, of course. You had all the infantry units that could have gone in and dealt with them, and they saw that threat, and they did all they could to neutralize your. This is in turn 1, their turn 1 shooting phase. All their dreadnoughts, despite the fact my dreadnoughts were visible and clear targets, they decided to shoot all of your infantry instead.
Yeah, I think I had about. I had 2 guys left in the 6-man squad. And I also think I went down to. Did I only have 1 plasma inceptor left as well?
You had 1 plasma inceptor left on 1 wound.
Yeah, so they did a good job of nullifying that portion of threat that I had. On the other side, I had 1 squad that I sort of double moved up to get onto the objective. So I spent 2 CP to move them twice so they could get onto the objective. And then I had another squad sat on the objective in our backfield, and they basically just hung out there doing nothing for the whole game because they're just sitting on that objective scoring us. The only points we really scored in the game, to be honest. I think with them, they were like really good opponents. Their list outmatched us in terms of theirs was actually really competitive, I think. And yeah, I think they just played the mission a lot better as well in terms of how we did. Because sometimes we had some opportunities to try and shift them off of their back objective. So I can't remember if it was turn 2 or turn 3. I dropped the Inceptors down with the Smash Captain. And the idea was we would shoot them with the Inceptors off of their home objective. So that's a threat that they then got to deal with. And then the Smash Captain would charge into the lieutenant that they had nearby, who was also sat next to a Redemptor Dreadnought, because we had Assassinate as well. So we was like, that would be some extra points. And I think there was only like 2 or 3 intercessors on that objective left after I'd shot at them. And it would have been a really long charge for the captain to have actually gone in there and killed them. I think I'd needed 11. So I went for the 9-inch charge to go for the lieutenant, but I still failed that. But ultimately, yeah, it would have been, not that I could have done it because I failed the charge regardless, but ultimately you should have really prioritized trying to kill those guys off of their home objective rather than trying to score some extra points for Assassinate, because them continually scoring objectives is ultimately what lost us game, because we did okay on the secondaries, but lost it by a long way on the primaries because they were just getting the score more pretty consistently.
Well, we kept not having enough firepower. We could throw those eliminators, so they were just constantly on that objective, so we weren't getting that one.
Yeah, I mean, I even charged stuff into combat with them and just couldn't shift them even then, which was just like, when it became a marine on marine, it was cool. You do a bunch of damage or not do much damage, but we make our saves, and the same thing happened both ways. So we had some turns where we just kind of clonking heads and no one died, just because that's how it ended up.
Well, there's also the first game where you charged with your Smash Captain, who had to make a 9-inch charge on 3d6, pick the highest, with a reroll, and you failed.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Which is pretty bad, because then you failed to charge that Redemptor, who then almost single-handedly killed all your Inceptors and the Smash Captain.
Yeah, so in response to that, they charged in with their lieutenant and the Dreadnought, and I think the Dreadnought killed the captain and killed some of the Inceptors, and then the lieutenant finished off the Inceptors.
And you didn't have, because you did the CP to do the charging, you didn't have enough only in Defter's Duty End, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I think my mistakes in that one is I was too keen to use a bunch of stratagems. So like turn one, I was like, I'm doing all of this stuff, and basically blew all my CP because I had it and I was being really frivolous. Whereas in the other games, I sort of learnt my lesson and was a lot more conservative with the CP. So I had more ample opportunity to use some interesting stratagems sort of in the later turns.
You do need to learn to be resourceful with them, especially when you're being relatively limited with them, because it's really easy with like ultra buff character combos to put a lot of points into Smash Captains, for example.
Yeah, because I started the game on 4 CP because I started off with 6, and that was almost like a limiting factor. When you only have such limited CP, it does make the games sort of more interesting, because you can only do these kind of key stratagems like once or twice in a game. So because I spent 1 to get an extra warlord trait, 1 to get an extra relic. So I was down to 4 for the beginning of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when you and me, Phil, doubled up back in 2019 or whatever it was, and we ran a Smash Captain alongside some Krieg and some other things. And yeah, basically, if I remember correctly, I basically spent all our CP turn 1 on the Smash Captain.
Yeah, because he was Blood Angel, so I'm like, I'm double moving him, or I'm pre-game moving. I'm making him attack twice. Oh, he's dead. I'm making him attack again. But then he would wipe out half the opponent's army with that, 6 CP or whatever it would have taken.
It was always a worthwhile exchange in that sense. We'd always basically point him at some of the most critical nonsense and then just be like, yep, cool, that's dead.
I think because I was really toying up in the list whether to take the relic chapter master. Oh, because I spent 40 points to make him chapter master as well. Whether to give him the relic, it gives him +1 toughness and an extra +1 to his save, which probably would have been better at the 2 because I kept failing my charges. But I also think always deep striking him seems like a bad use of what he should be doing, because he can't even use the chapter master ability to give full rerolls to 1 unit, because the turn he deep strikes, he's not on the table during the command phase to do that. Whereas actually I think with him I just need to sort of have him jumping up from my deployment zone from turn 1. I
mean, I think for the way
you could not make him a chapter master.
Well, I mean, I had the point spare. What was I going to do? Take an extra Inceptor?
Put a shield on the lieutenant.
Well, that would be nice if I had the model.
No, I'm joking.
I mean, in terms of obviously what you've got versus what might be good for the future, it might be worth looking at Jump Pack Chaplain as an option. Those have definitely got some fun opportunities for them to keep with the Jump Pack theme. Otherwise, obviously, just do the Primaris Chaplain on bike.
I mean, I always like the idea, because the original concept of the force was to do like all jump force. So ideally do jump pack primaris, jump pack chaplain, jump pack librarian, jump pack lieutenant. But after I painted all of those, I was like, I've lost my will to live to do it, because there's so much extra detail on those inceptors, like the cables and the plugs and the weird shoe things. It's like all of those need to be painted up separately. So it's like a lot of detail.
I definitely feel like you need a squad of suppressors in there somewhere.
I don't like the look of them though. That's the thing.
Oh mate, they look much nicer as minis than they look in photos of them. They're a cool kit for what they are. And you've got them, haven't you?
No, not those guys.
Did you not?
Because
they
only come in. No, I didn't. Because I'm not a huge fan of the Phobos armor. I like the Reavers; they look good. But beyond that, I'm not super keen on them.
Phobos has sort of grown on me over time. I think it's probably my favorite of the free Primaris armor sets.
They're the most different. They have some character to them.
Yeah.
I think their helmets are a little bit underwhelming, but the armor itself is pretty cool. I think there's some cool stuff that they've got some cool visuals to them for sure.
That's true.
All right, well there you go. So
one thing I want to give a shout out in the first game too is my Leviathan Dreadnought, which does what it does in most games. Unfortunately, it trundles up the board and then gets bogged down in combat with something which has an invuln save. Which happened to the Blade Guard, where it just got stuck for for 3 rounds of the game, just trading blows with Blade Guard, and neither could kill each other.
I think for the first 2 turns you couldn't kill a single one, and they could only chip away a couple of wounds here and there.
He couldn't really wound me, and when he did, it's like, okay, I've lost a wound, and then I'd get my 4 attacks back, and then each one of those, if each one that's going to go through would kill him, and he'd make his invulns every time, which happens a lot with my Leviathan Dreadnought. It gets bogged down with something. So yeah, shout out to him doing what little he could to just take up space on the board.
Yeah. Game 1, we lost. It was 39 points to us to 87.
They did massively snowball us though, because they were controlling the primaries and they had stranglehold, so they just completely steamrolled us.
Sucks, guys. But hey, I mean, like you said, you lost the first game. Now you get to lower your expectations. You get to enjoy yourself for the rest.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And
so at this point, you're 1 for 1, right? You lost the first one. You won the last one. What was the middle like? And I admit Phil was about to say something else, so let's give him a chance to say that.
No, I was going to say the second one was a good game and probably the most tactically interesting and because the first one we lost and it was pretty clear after a turn or 2 that it was going south for us. The third game, Richard's shaking his head. Maybe it wasn't. I
think we could have, if the dice had been on our side, we could have.
Yeah, and that is something to be said.
If all we did was roll 5s and 6s,
well, this is the thing. My rolling was terrible in that first game. It was really bottom of the barrel, classic Phil rolling, basically. Which didn't help, obviously. Yeah, the third game was a bit of a steamroll for us, and I think after the first turn, it was pretty clear. Not that we had it in the bag, but that it was definitely going our way. And yeah, turn 2, it was like, okay, we've got this now. The third game, sorry, the second game, third in the context of the chronological order in which we're talking about it, was the closest, I would say, of the games. It was Overrun. It was Dawn of War deployment. There's sort of 3 objectives, 1 in our deployment zone, 2 just outside of, so you can easily kind of get to them. And it was the terrain I thought was set up quite interesting. So the middle objective that's definitely in your deployment zone is behind a ruin that you can easily just sort of hide that unit there. They can't be shot at. The one on the left, there's a unit that I think can be on the objective while still hidden. And if they want, they can kind of go up to the edge of the ruin to shoot out through the windows. And then the last ruin, sort of the bottom right-hand corner, you can be safely in there and not be shot at, but not on the objective. So I had a sort of a unit of intercessors in each ruin, effectively being on the objectives, except that last one. And it was turn 1, you've got to actually go out in front of the ruin to score that objective. In terms of the army list we were up against, it was Imperial Fists and Space Wolves. The Space Wolf player had, I think it was Inquisition in terms of the scout unit that they had.
No, they had. Did they have scouts? I don't know.
There was one in their middle objective that we pretty much never interacted with the whole game, but they sat on that objective.
Oh, I don't know what they were. Some kind of troop choice.
Yeah, one of the troop scouty units. They had them. They basically had a big blob of Thunderwolf cavalry, a captain and jump pack.
It was a rune priest with a jump pack.
Oh, rune priest,
who was in the middle of the bubble of the blob of
to give
cavalry.
them like -1 to hit, counters being in cover, and a bunch of other ignore Overwatch as well, which was a key ability that he had as well, that he had to be in engagement range to be able to activate that ability. He had a chaplain on a bike, and had a Vanguard vet squad as well with jump packs and I can't remember,
and a Redemptor Dreadnought.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Redemptor Dreadnought. And then the Imperial Fist player had a Redemptor Dreadnought as well. I think they were like pretty much identical loadouts with Macroplasma. Yeah. He had a captain. I'm pretty sure he had a lieutenant. A Calux. Calidus Assassin.
He had an apothecary. I don't know which one of them had the Calidus Assassin. One of them did.
It was the Imperial Fist player. Had the Calidus Assassin. Some suppressors, some eradicators, a big 10-man squad of intercessors, eliminators. He had a free man. Oh, with the Lads Feudals as well. Which was pretty interesting.
2 units I've never seen on a battlefield, which was the Lads Feudal eliminators and suppressors. I've never seen them painted up on the battlefield. So it was cool to see those.
Yeah,
suppressors is well, at one point they were really common, but it's not uncommon. I mean, what are they, like 85, maybe 100 points? They're pretty good value for that. And I think the Phobos unit you were thinking of is the Incursors, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the ones with the knives and the bolt guns, right?
I think so. To be fair, they just hid behind some ruins the whole game, so I didn't see the models at all.
I'm looking at your photos there in.
Oh, okay. Well, yes. Also, if anyone wants to know how the games went, I've posted some photos on my Instagram. I'll try and post up a bunch of them to the Lookouts Instagram as well, so people can look at them for reference.
Your opponent's suppressors weren't looking like they were having a good time staying on their stems. In the photos, they're all like holding on to them. It's like they're pole dancing with their flight stems.
Yeah, they hadn't figured out. The guy we're talking to, the guy, he wasn't sure how he was going to have them attached to the stems yet. So he was debating if he's going to magnetize them or glue them or something.
Yeah,
gotcha.
So they were sort of stemless to an extent.
Yes. Yeah, clinging on for dear life. Nice looking army, though. I mean, again, yellow's always a troublesome color scheme to tackle.
But yeah, those were really well painted, and the Space Wolves look really nice as well. And I think the Dreadnoughts, especially on both of them, like stood out really well. I think what was interesting with that game is, obviously, I was deep striking my captain and the plasma inceptors, and because of that, again, they deployed their army really reservedly. But also, like, even into turn 2 and 3, like the Thunderwolf cavalry took ages to go anywhere. Like, he kept hiding them behind the big L shape in the middle of the board for a couple of turns, rather than being really aggressive with them. And same with the Vanguard vets. Like, the Vanguard vets basically stayed on an objective for 2 turns in their deployment zone because he didn't have anything else to sit on that objective, and he didn't want to use the Redemptor because then it's not shooting if it was there. Or, I mean, he could have. It's weird because they could have held the objective in front of the ruins, but
it felt like they didn't have enough troop choices because this was a 6 objective mission, and they didn't really have enough troop choices to do. Or they didn't feel spread out enough because they put all of their Imperial Fists on one flank.
Yeah, then they had the the scout ones, the Primaris ones, which you just talked about, Dan, were in the middle objective. Vanguard vets and Redemptor Space Wolf Redemptor on the other objective. And yeah, so they all the Space Wolf player like super hanged back. So basically we just piled into the Imperial Fist player for the first couple of turns and just took him out the game, and then focused the rest on the Space Wolf player. And if the Space Wolf player was more aggressive, because I had just effectively 2 intercessor squads on 2 of those objectives, he could have easily taken them off there. Admittedly, one of them was also protected by one of Richie's contemptors, but even so, like, they could have dealt with that, I think. But because they were, weren't aggressive enough, that gave us the ability to sort of press the advantage. Like,
I think they weren't sure how the kind of the basically my dreadnoughts going up the left and into this wall of Imperial Fist shooting on turn 1, which is quite annoying. That's a lot of firepower you face on turn 1 from heavy weapons from Imperial Fist. Fortunately, I survived it. I didn't lose any units on the first turn. Cullen was down to 1 wound, so he somehow managed to survive, at least get me the rerolls to hit on my response to shooting. But then what was interesting is I essentially couldn't do any stratagems in turn 1 whatsoever because they had the Calidus Assassin. So I couldn't risk doing a stratagem, because if he rolled a 4 up, then I wouldn't be able to do it, because I wouldn't have any additional. I'd be at 0 CP at that point, which is where I'd want to be. So that Calidus Assassin meant that we were quite really limited in what we could try and do stratagem wise in turn 1. And then
what was the ruling on CP regen then? I mean,
you get 1 each. So, but you
got 1 each.
Yeah, so we get 1 each at the beginning of our turns, and then each of us have our own pool of CP that only we can spend, which I thought was quite a good way of doing it, actually, as opposed to like having 1 pool that we can both share.
I think having 1 pool between the 2 of you would be the correct way of playing it, but obviously is what it is.
Yeah, I quite liked it this way. It's more limiting, and in your example earlier, it stops one person just going, I'm having all the CP, just kind of like whatever to your mate.
Because what it would make, though, it created certain scenarios where you'd run where the player who needed the CP wouldn't have the CP. Yeah, there was a turning point in this game, which I think was in turn 2, which was when the Calidus Assassins turned up, and it was deployed 6 inches away from your troops in the back line.
Yeah,
and it was we used some of our little CP we had to do Allspec scan, but we took like 1 wound off it. But if that Calidus Assassin got into our back lines, it would just walk through all of our objective holders and units and just cut them all to pieces. Fortunately, well, I say fortunately, unfortunately for them, when they had Phil's dice at this point, they must have done, because they had to make a 6-inch charge and they rolled a 5. But ordinarily, you say, "Oh, just CP roll that." They hadn't got any CP because they'd used all of their CP in the shooting phase to try to rapid fire their Imperial Fist to take out 2 of my dreadnoughts in that turn. But because they did that, they didn't have the CP, which meant that the Calidus Assassin then was sat in the middle of the board.
Yeah.
And then to be fair, we had to shoot it with a lot of things to kill it.
Yeah, I shot it with 2 squads of intercessors. Then I had to use rapid fire stratagem for one of them to shoot again, and it was only on that second round of that squad shooting did we manage to finish it off, because I think by that point it was like down to 1 wound, and it was like, yeah, it's worth the 2 CP to kill this thing, otherwise it will be too much of a nuisance.
I think it was like 40 bolt gunshots plus a multi-melter and a storm bolter from my dreadnought.
Yeah, plus the crack grenades from the auxiliary grenade launchers as well. So it took quite a bit of dealing with to get rid of. But that, I think, was the weird swingy game.
That's what the weird swingy way with 4-up invuns, though, right? Because like you can get that, or conversely, I mean, my Calidus Assassin got shot by 5 Terminator storm bolters or combi bolters as they were. They just killed it outright. It was just like, there it went. So it was just like, oh, okay, cool. That's how that went.
Yeah, that can happen.
Very lucky.
One of the actual interesting nuances around how the CP worked, especially was in our first game. So we were doing lots of combats like turn 2 and 3, and it would be like, okay, which of you's got CP to do the combat interrupt? Because obviously you can only do a stratagem once between 2 of you, but sometimes you'd be like, oh, this one player hasn't got CP to do it, so this determines the order in which we're going to do our combat, because we know they can't interrupt, but the other one can.
Yes, yeah. So that to me is like one of those instances where you kind of expose one of the issues with the thing, and I don't know. Personally, I would just pool your resources because it just systematically feels more sensible. Because otherwise, it's just anyway. They did it the way they did it, and I'm sure you were cool with that. So, is what it is on that front.
Yes, that was pretty much it for the game. I think once the Calidus had been killed, that kind of swung it for us. Zed, we pretty much focused on the Imperial Fist player, took them out. Oh, and then that's when the Thunderwolf cavalry sort of changed direction, or finally decided where it was going to go from the midboard, charged across towards Richard's Leviathan and Dreadnought Blob. Where they then had like a bit of a showdown for a couple of turns.
Yeah, if I remember, they charged Cullen, and I used the Iron Hand stratagem for overwatching on 4s because I had 2 CPs available, and he was able to kill one of the Thunderwolves in Overwatch, or one of the Thunderwolf cavalry in Overwatch, which is very handy because I've got a feeling that they left him on basically like 1 or 2 wounds anyway. But it wasn't Cullen, so Cullen was already dead because he died earlier. It was my regular Leviathan. And he was able to take out one of the Thunderwolves, and then when they charged into him, they did an awful lot of damage and left him near death as well. Mm-hmm. So fortunately, I was able to use that stratagem, which was very handy. Because we learned that in our first game. From what I remember, some of the other people played the Iron Hands guys we played, and then they learned that. They were reminded by that stratagem as well, and they used it to great effect, so I'm told.
Yeah. And then we had a bit of a showdown with their chaplain had zoomed across to target my Primaris lieutenants, and then their captain piled in as well and I think they finished off the rest of my Bolter and Scepter squad because that had been the thorn in their side for the first couple of turns. So yeah, those all died on my side, but then I still had all my guys on the objectives.
There's one other little story that you're forgetting, Phil. There's a great moment. I'll let you. I'll set it up. You can.
All right. Okay.
Which is when on the other side of the board I had my Contemptor, who was like helping to just act like a shield there in case they tried to charge your intercessors. And then the Vanguard vets came out. They finally moved their Vanguard vets out and then charged into my Contemptor. The little Contemptor who was nearly killed by all of their, because they were their Space Wolves and they've got their lightning claws. And they almost killed my Contemptor. But then, who saved him?
Exactly. So I had a squad of intercessors that were sat on that objective, and so they came forward. They stepped up. They charged in, obviously getting their +1 attack for the charge. But they're -1 AP. Even though they're hitting with fists, they're -1 AP now because they're in the Assault Doctrine. And then they're doing 2 damage apiece. So I managed to wipe out the rest of the Vanguard squad. And that finally showed how good the White Scars can be if you can wait around basically until the Assault Doctrines kicks in.
Once that Assault Doctrine gets a going, that's when the White Scars come to play.
Yeah, because the regular intercessors can do a lot of work once they're in combat in the Assault Doctrine. Just getting there's the problem. And then in this game, my captain he dropped down in front of the Redemptor. The plan is he was gonna charge into him because at that point the Redemptor was hiding in the ruins on that objective because I think he'd taken a fair bit of damage. And they just needed something to sit on that objective. So the plan was I was going to charge in, and then I can consolidate onto the objective to score us some points. But I failed the charge, and I'd run out of CP to do a reroll, and I'd also forgot that he had the Imperium sword, so I forgot about the free reroll. So that was the one time it would have been useful.
It's hard times, Phil. It's not easy remembering all your rules.
No, I know, and that's obviously like the first time I played with them all year. To be fair,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it wasn't too bad. But yeah, in the end, we scored 94 points, and they scored 53. So a resounding success in that second game.
Nice work.
We picked much better secondaries, based on Phil's suggestions of what we should take. So we did an incredible on that one.
I think though there's lessons in all of that though, right? In terms of if you're going to these kind of events and you're playing in a doubles or even in a singles thing, it's definitely worthwhile. Obviously, getting those practice games in to get a bit more familiarity, but it's also good to sort of take the time to kind of think about, you know, the mission structure and understand what secondaries actually complement the list and, you know, those kind of strategies. Because I myself, in my gaming experience, found that, you know, my general lack of awareness of the current day secondaries has consistently let me down in tournament play. I definitely lost, you know, at least one game during the LGT because of my secondary selection. So it's what it is. But guys, I mean, it sounds really interesting. I mean, there you go, 2-1, not a bad outing for your you know, relative lack of experience playing alongside each other, and also Phil's general lack of gaming of recent you know, of recent months. So I mean, that's a pretty good result.
I think we did pretty well. I think I thought it was 15, but I think when I double checked, it was 16th place out of, I think, 46.
Not bad.
Or it was about that many. I think technically we should have been higher because in the last game, the opponent sort of conceded, but we sort of played it out in terms of how many points could we have theoretically scored for the rest of it. But in theory, if they concede, you're meant to get like max points 100. If we'd have done that, I think we'd have shot up into top 10 quite easily, if not a bit higher. But it's fine because, you know, that's a bit of a nonsense rule anyway. So as it stands, I thought we did incredibly well with a very not say average list, but a list that we hadn't really given a whole lot of thought in terms of optimization. We didn't game it in any real way. So I thought ultimately it did pretty well for what the event was and what we bought.
No, nice. Good skills, guys. Well played.
Oh, I was going to say a quick shout out to our RFW bros that were playing. In their second game, they played the Iron Hands guys that we played in our first matchup, so they managed to beat them and get swift revenge for us. In the final game, they were on the top table in the number 1 spot, but sadly they lost it by, I think, like 10 or 15 points and came 5th overall. So they did really well as well.
Nice. That's good skills on their part, yeah.
Yeah.
Well done. All right, well, there we go. A beautiful account of your doubles gaming fun. I guess we'll move on now to me talking about what I did in the singles. So there we go. Are we going to say goodbye to Richie now, I assume?
It depends what order you edit in, I guess. So possibly. Bye-bye.
We will say goodbye. We will. We'll do it. You know, this will be the end of Richie, and then, or you know, maybe he will. Well, either way, you're not going to be hearing the next bit, regardless of how it comes together for Rich. So that is that.
Yeah,
Unless, of
it's
course,
been
I
lovely
put the bit.
It's been lovely being here.
Exactly. Unless I put our first. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, we're moving on. Transitional noise. Woo! All right, and Phil. I suppose it's that time where I talk about how I got on in their singles. So, do you have any initial thoughts, questions, feelings about the overall proceedings, or shall I just get into it, mate?
Tell us your list.
I'll tell you my list. So I went with what could broadly be described as an Imperium Highlander list. I took one of everything, essentially. So I had the AdMech, so the Adeptus Mechanicus, of which were Lucius. Within that, I had my Calidus Assassin, who was my agent of the Imperium. I had my Tech Priest Manipulus, and I had a unit of 20 Scutari Vanguard. Then I had my Custodes patrol detachment, And within that detachment, I had a shield captain on Dawn Eagle jet bike, which was updated or rather upgraded to a commander, which was the master strategist commander, which essentially meant that I could regenerate CPs. Then I took 3 custody guard, as in 1 squad of 3. And I took the Dreadnought or the Contemptor Dreadnought, but the Galatus or the Galatus, the one with the sword and shield. And then lastly, I had House Raven Imperial Knights, which I took the Knight Castellan, the Knight Gallant, and a Armiger Helvrin. And that was 2,000 points on the nose of assorted nonsense.
Old school soup, basically.
Absolutely. And as I said from the outset, the aspiration was just to bring an army that was easy to play, despite the fact it needs about 7 books to run it. But the point was, it was like minimal model count, easy, simple kind of pivotal pieces that would essentially give me a lot of functionality and a lot of options. And I think that's the thing. I think my army has a solution to most problems. I just think the problem is that it's difficult for the army to really perform at the highest level. But then I wasn't really concerned with playing at the highest level. I just wanted to be at the event, soak up the atmosphere, play games with people that were, fun, good company, and just, enjoy the overall experience. And I'm happy to report that all 5 of my games were against absolute gentlemen. Like, every single person that I played was an extraordinarily, high caliber opponent, but also a, real pleasure, which was fantastic. Because at every point that I kept winning games in the early instances, I was more and more concerned that eventually I'd come up against someone who's a bit prickly. But it didn't happen. I genuinely just played great person after great person.
Well, that's good. I normally find at 2-day events, you always have one game that's a bit hard in some way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think, there was no illusion that the people I was playing were hoping to win. And they did everything they could to try and get the wins. But, ultimately they behaved really well, and I didn't really feel like there was any jankiness going on. I tried my best to be as knowledgeable as I could be of my rules. I'm sure I made a few minor mistakes here, there, and everywhere, but broadly, I think I was pretty much on the money. Again, it's difficult to say, isn't it, with that kind of stuff? You never know if you're, when you make mistakes, you don't really know. I suppose there's a difference between mistakes and purposely trying to tilt things in your favor. But there were a few instances where I was like not sure quite what some things did, but it was relatively quick to sort of just look it up and be across it. And that's after having played a couple tournaments with variants of this list ahead of bringing it to LGT. So yeah, but no, anyway, look, I mean, game 1, played against an individual called Clive Mayo. He heralds from Blackhawk Gaming in Yeovil. So they're a gaming group that I had the good pleasure of communicating with ahead of the event. I basically typed into Facebook Clive Mayo, and the only reference to a Clive Mayo that sat within my kind of sphere of influence was this Black Hawk Gaming group. I don't even think Clive's on Facebook. I think his brother was on, and they were talking about stuff. And yeah, me and Clive...
So is this your research, your pre-game research that you did?
Well, I just wanted to reach out and be like, hey, we got each other game 1. Hope you're all right. Maybe pass on contact details if one of us is running late or something, or just generally just do a little bit of hazing, a little bit of bit of whatever.
Never thought about doing that, but that's quite a nice idea, actually.
Well, an event of that size, I just felt like it was something worth trying. But also it's good to get a feel for the person that you're going to play and gauge that thing. And credit where credit's due to the guys at Black Hawk Wargaming over in Yeovil. Phenomenal group of guys. Like I reached out to them on their Facebook chat, had a really great conversation with them over Facebook. Didn't actually speak to Clive beforehand, but felt really reassured that he was going to be a great guy. And, as it transpires, he really was. He was running Necrons. It was a really tough matchup for him because, truth be told, he didn't really have a list that could hang in a competitive environment. But then neither did I, in my opinion. But I think the difference was Clive really struggled with certain aspects of the matchup. So he had a really, really, really big investment in Lich Guard. So he had taken like 20 Lich Guard and these overlords that he had tooled up to the max. And his whole plan was to go behind enemy lines and to basically wang all these models into the old Necron croissant and then basically run them up the other end of the board and then drop them off. So as he could basically live in my deployment zone, scoring behind enemy lines. And to be fair, he got his way, but the way it panned out was essentially he was absolutely isolated in one corner of the board, and I had essentially just taken dominance of the other three quadrants. So effectively, I just outpointed him in every way, shape, or form. And I couldn't kill all those Lich Guard because they are a real nuisance to get rid of. But I need to because they're slow. They didn't pose any meaningful threat once they'd been delivered into the bottom left-hand corner. So I just was able to pick apart everything else that was there, and it just was a pretty straightforward win. My Death Grip let me down in the last turn, which is the only reason I didn't score 100 points. Had it been that Clive hadn't rolled a 6 to scramble free of the awesome might of Death Grip, I would have got the 100. But as it was
that for assassinate?
Assassinate, yeah. Had I killed his warlord with Death Grip, I would have got the full 15 for that, which would have put me on 100. But as it was, I finished on 97.
Brilliant.
97 to 67 against Clive Mayo. So off to a good start, although, I mean, all credit where credit's due to Clive. Was one of those instances where I think, the way that first game went, I was very much of the opinion of, well, I got really lucky with a matchup against someone who, maybe wasn't the most competitively minded. And I think Clive would comfortably assert that was his perspective. He's much more of a kind of mid-tier player, and I think he's comfortable enough to admit that. But it went well. I think it was a fun game. I mean, again, it was a great way to kick things off because it was just chilled out. It was easy going. We had a fun time, and I moved on to play a nice fella from Glasgow called Larry Martin, and Larry Martin was running the Grey Knights. It was a really interesting game. I've not played New Grey Knights prior to this. Obviously, you and me, Phil, went into great detail about what they do, so I felt pretty comfortable that I knew what their main tricks were. But what Larry had essentially done is gone for a real MSU, minimum size unit approach. Lots of models all over the place, real board supremacy, really difficult to pin down because those Grey Knights are mobile. And I completely forgot about the fact that there's a war gear item that you can put on the Grandmaster Dread Knight, where you can either elect for it to have a 3-up invuln or something, or maybe a 4-up invuln, or you can choose to shunt it, as in teleport it to another area of the board.
Yeah, I think that's the one people go for.
Yeah, big time. And I lined up a really good sort of like charge scenario, and then I shot at the character, and he ended up like moving it away, and it was like, oh no, that's a bit of a bother.
Oh, no.
But I managed to subdue that, and in the end, I mean, I practically tabled him, but it was still super close. I mean, in the end, it was a 72-65 win to me. It was hard fought, man. But Larry, great guy. I mean, again, came all the way down from Glasgow. Really, really, entertaining fella to play against. Really chilled out game as well, though. Good attitude. Just everything about that was a nice second round because it was challenging. It wasn't an easy win by any stretch of the imagination. I think the points reflect that. When you're winning by a margin of 7 points in 40k 9th edition, you've really been pushed. So I mean, Larry was a good guy. The game was great. I'm trying to think if there was anything else of note in that game. I mean, it all came down to little weird wibbly things. Like, for example, he deep striked in the Dread Knight to get a charge off on a bunch of my Custodes, and he'd completely forgotten about Tanglefoot grenades. So literally, down comes this Dread Knight going, "I'm going to charge these Custodes," and I'm like, "Cool, Tanglefoot," and he's like, "Oh."
Is that
So
-1 or -2?
it's like minus D3, I think,
Ah.
or maybe even minus D6. I think I only played it D3, so this is again one of those instances where I'm making mistakes already. But the point was, I think I rolled a 5 or something, and yeah, we basically were like, "Well, you need a double 6 to make that charge now," and it just didn't pan out for him. So yeah, there were a couple of interesting setups that I was able to utilize, and it was at this point that really the kind of the real kind of like value of the army started to become apparently clear to me, because you could start to see all these really interesting, finessed ways of running the list. And
I was just going to say, Tanglefoot is D6.
No, well, then I undersold myself on that side of things. But irrespective, it was one of those ones where, it worked out anyway. But yeah, it was a great game. I think, again, if I'm really sort of thinking back to it, it was just a lot of me chasing Grey Knights around the board because they were just everywhere. And it was like whack-a-mole. They just kept popping up, and I just had to keep smacking them down. Because he went for Retrieve Octarius data. And as a result, he was just popping up going, Rod. I'm like, stop it. So I had to sort of stop him from getting max on Rod. And it's just, it's just really, really grindy game. But yeah, it went good. But no, I enjoyed playing Larry. And hopefully I'll get a chance to play him again down the road. But yeah, it was a fun one. And Grey Knights are definitely a really, really strong army. And they definitely were strong in this matchup. He did some real work, but I just kept my mind on the mission, and things went all right. Game 3 was against a guy called Martin Walker. Martin running Chaos Knights, lots of Forge World Knights. So a lot of people would argue that he had taken the bestest versions of Knights. So he had the Mechanicus one that everyone's running, the
Megara,
and then he had the armigers with the
lightning locks,
the
Moiraxes.
Moiraxes, yeah. So he had all of that stuff. So it was
nice.
And honest to God, I whiffed so hard turn 1. My turn 1 was utterly atrocious. He killed my Gallant turn 1 effortlessly.
Oof.
Like I just literally, I was in a really bad spot, I thought, turn 1. But miraculously, I turned it into a really significant win. And again, if you had told me at the end of turn 1, don't worry, mate, you're going to win 84-36, I'd be like, there's no way, because this game is already lost. But it all just kind of swung together on a few kind of critical moments that essentially resulted in me being able to secure the win. And Martin, I mean, absolutely fantastic guy. Currently dwelling in my hometown of Salisbury, not my hometown presently, but where I grew up. So yeah, the fact that he's a Salisbury boy.
I feel like you've made notes about everyone. Like what's their full name, where they live, what's their national insurance number.
Yeah. Well, it's because
who was your first girlfriend, that sort of thing.
Well, it's just cool because I get a chance to kind of chat with the guys and get to know them. I don't know. That's how I am when I game. I'm just really interested in people. I just like to listen to what's going on with them and like how they're getting on, and just generally finding out things about people is kind of fun. But yeah, I mean, it was significant in the sense that obviously Mark is currently dwelling in a place where I've got a lot of history in that sense. So it was just nice to sort of. It was quite surprising. He was like, "Oh, I just travelled up from Salisbury." It's like, "Oh, no way!" I was like, "My old hometown. That's amazing." So it was great. Yeah, I mean, and again, we're gonna catch up at some point in the future and roll some dice again, because he was a really, really good guy, and his Knight Army list is super fun, and he played his he played his bollocks off in terms of how he approached it, but unfortunately, it just didn't go his way. And again, the problem is with that Chaos Knight list is it just can't do anything with the primary once it starts losing models. It just he just got choked out. It was just one of those ones where it just wasn't going his way from about turn 2, turn 3 onwards, and he knew he'd lost. But yeah, no, he absolutely, took the whole thing ridiculously well and was just super fun to play. So yeah, that was an interesting game, old Martin. That was fun. So end of day 1, I'm 3-0. I'm feeling myself. I'm like,
That's very good.
I can't believe I've gone 3-0 with this army. Like, this is crazy. And that evening I was staying at a friend's house in North London. Ended up watching the old Anthony Joshua fight on DAZN. Had a good evening hanging out with my buddy, and didn't really pay any mind to 40k. Didn't talk to anyone about what was upcoming. Didn't even look at my opponent's list for the next day. I just basically rocked up and was like, okay, what am I up against? And round 4, I'm playing a lovely bloke called Will. And Will is a London boy, in the continuation of telling people where these people dwell. And again, just honest to God, like I came up to the table thinking, oh, this could be a bit bothersome. But I get chatting to Will and I'm just like, oh, fantastic. This guy's great. Like, we're going through each other's army lists. It's a really nice vibe. You're getting a good set of feels off the whole thing. And we start explaining like some of the weird nuances of the list. And I look at his list straight away and I'm like, right, okay, this list is tough. Like a super hard matchup for me. So it was Emperor's Children, Chaos Space Marines. And I know a lot of you out there listening to this will go, now come on, Dan. Chaos Space Marines are bottom of the barrel.
Suddenly, 1 wound, they don't even have 2.
Well, that's it. However, there are a number of really, really, really optimal options that the Emperor's Children have access to.
And did he have all of them?
Oh, mate. And credit where credit due to Will. He's a really good player. Like, he has utterly optimized this list to the point that it has 0 redundancy in it. It was, dare I say, as perfect a Chaos Space Marine list as someone could write. Throw in the fact that it is loaded to the nines with anti-tank melter weapons. And it was literally the worst possible list I could see, ran by the best possible opponent I could play. But, from the outset, I was like, right, okay. Controversially, Mission 4 was priority target, which is basically, as far as I'm aware, the only mission within the GT mission pack where every competitive player tells you have to take the secondary, because the secondary is, for the mission, you stand on your priority target, i.e. your objective in your deployment zone, and you get free command points every turn. So at the end of every turn, you get free command points for just standing on that objective. Now, me in my infinite wisdom thought to myself, there's a problem with this strategy. Because the one thing I know is that everyone is going to take that secondary. And the one thing I know is that if I take that secondary myself, I'm essentially painting myself into a corner. Because the way his army list plays, he's constantly serving me up problems. It was units of Raptors, units of Terminators in Deep Strike, unit of Noise Marines and a Dreadclaw. I knew that my army could not sustain the damage output that this army could deliver. And if I just let myself sit in the corner, I was only ever going to lose, because literally this army was just going to keep coming until it broke me. So I very much was of the opinion of, right, well, I just have to sack that off and I just have to go for the throat, because the only way my army wins is if I just, punch them in the nose before they have a chance to react to anything. Now, frustratingly, Will ended up going first, I believe. Yes, he ended up going first, which again didn't. Oh no, actually I went first. I apologize. I did go first. But I didn't have very many good options. But I ran my gallant into his back lines to really start applying pressure, and then I moved stuff up to the mid table for the ensuing, onslaught of things that were going to come down. And I weathered the storm turn one okay, and by the end of turn two, I was in a pretty strong place on the primary. But my main issue is that I wasn't able to at any point challenge on his secondaries. So effectively where I ended up was my strategy was to go aggressive to try and stop him from scoring his secondaries. But effectively what happened is I basically just kind of chose the worst possible combination of options because I just wasn't doing a good enough job of stopping him scoring his secondaries. And as a result, I was not scoring particularly good secondaries. So everything in my side was basically primary. I was all over the primary because I was smothering the board, but I just couldn't do anything to stop him like doing what he was doing. But bizarrely, even with all that, at the end of Battle Round 5, it all came down to the survivability of my Contemptor. So essentially, even though I was behind on certain things, the final score depended on could I score grind them down and could I hold the last objective. Because basically, if I scored grind them down, I would have got the 3 points to have put me on 76. But if I had scored the last objective away from him, I would have gotten 81 or something. But in the end, I ended up on 73 to his 77. And what it all came down to was my inability to roll a 6 on 66, which is just
so like one feel no pain save.
One feel no pain save on the Contemptor. Now, bear in mind though, Phil, what I will say for the record is I should have lost that game on a multitude of occasions. I was just really jammy with my 4 bin buns. For example, my Knight Castellan got charged by a unit of like 6 Terminators, and he proceeded to roll a bucket load of wounds, but then I rolled an inordinate amount of 5s to the point that I ended up on 1 wound, but I should have statistically have lost that model to that charge, but then was able to do some stuff with it. Although frustratingly, when the Castellan finally did die, it took out most of my stuff with it because I was going super aggro with it with some other units. So my shield captain in bike was practically killed by my exploding Castellan, which was not great. But it was super tight game and against an opponent who really challenged me. And I think we really challenged each other. I think, he brought a really interesting list that I don't think many people would have expected to see. And I had brought an interesting list that obviously did the same. And between the two of us, I think we had a really good game. And I think it went as well as I could hope for. I mean, obviously it would have been great to win it because I would have loved to have come away with 4 wins. I would have especially loved to have gotten 5 wins with this army, but I don't think that was within the realms of possibility. The fact that I was even in contention for 4 was pretty fantastic. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that was my game of the event. I think if I could have had a favorite game vote, I would have voted for Will because it was definitely one of the most challenging games of 9th edition 40k I've ever played against an opponent that was legitimately a great quality of opponent. And I think, ultimately it was, it's just one of those games where you go, oh yeah, competitive 40k can sometimes actually be really interesting and really fun when it's between armies that are legitimately competitive against each other, where your decisions as a general actually affect the outcome, because that is actually what we experienced in that game, despite all the stuff I was saying before about some of the issues about the supposed competitive nature of 40k. this was one of those matchups and one of those games where it was all about how we behaved as players and how we tackled the matchup. So yeah, nothing but complimentary of Will, although I kind of wish I'd beaten him, but I didn't deserve to win it or I shouldn't have won it because I deserved to win it if I won it, but I didn't win it. And there were so many instances where it was more jammy luck than tactical nuance in some respects. So for all of my boasting, a lot of it just came down to I just rolled an inordinate amount of 5s in one instance, but was a great game. But it clipped my wings, Phil. I was riding high.
Your bravado got you only so far in rolling them dice, but not
mate.
quite
Honestly. But I can't believe that I pushed it to 3 wins, as I say. The fact that I almost got the 4th. Like, if I'd gotten that 4th win, I would have been beside myself. I would have been like, this is crazy. Like, this should not have happened.
Like, oh.
But the universe obviously did what it was supposed to do, and I didn't win it.
I know, but 3-1, that's pretty good. And then obviously, how did your last game go?
So my last game was against Jamie. So Jamie was actually on the event team. So Jamie was one of the event
like a stand-in.
No. Well, he was playing in the whole tournament, but he was involved in the the operations of it. So essentially, he set up the tables, dealt with a lot of the logistics, basically.
Oh, okay.
So he was actually part of the LGT. And
did you tell him your criticism about the terrain?
Well, here's the thing. I couldn't criticize it from a sort of functional perspective, just purely from a visual perspective. And it wasn't so much the terrain. I think it's more the boards that I was frustrated with. But I think, it was functional, but it wasn't pretty, was it? But then, as you correctly said, they had to do so much of it. It's like, what do you expect, right?
At least it was better than polystyrene walls that were unpainted. So, yeah.
And I think there's a thing, right? Jamie was one of those guys who clearly was a good player, because as soon as I turned up, he started telling me what was in my list, and he basically started reeling it off to me, and I was like, oh God, you've actually taken the time to read all of this. And like, he's meticulously going through it, going, so this does this, right? Yeah. And why have you done this? And the funniest conversation that consistently happened to me with this tournament, it goes, so why have you gone Shadowkeeper or whatever it was? I can't even remember what Custodes shield thing I went with. I just picked one. I didn't even think about it. I just went, whatever. And they were like, so why'd you go with that one? What's the gimmick? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't use anything from it. And they're like, so what? You just picked one at random? It's like, yeah. And they're like, how did you win 3 games? Like, like, how is this list and you here? And I'm like, it's just how it's gone. Because obviously this guy was running Custodes, and he had loads of questions about why I'd done what I'd done with my Custodes. And like, so how come your shield captain doesn't have this? And I was like, well, because I couldn't afford the CP.
I don't need it. I've got bravado.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all I need.
Exactly. Just keep rolling 5s, mate. It's no problem. But this is the thing, like, so, and here's the thing. Every time I've ran this army and I play Custodes, it all comes down to the same thing. Can I kill the Telemon turn 1? If I kill the Telemon turn 1, I win. Here's the thing. I've never done it. It doesn't happen. The thing is unkillable. And that's the problem with the Custodes. They're the perfect counter to what I've got, because all I have is, that raw, like, power. So, like, early doors in my turn 1, I destroy his bike unit using my Vanguard squad with their auto wounds on 5. So I buff them with a manipulator. So I pop them out from behind a wall, and I blast all of his bikes dead, like, in turn 1. And I kill some other stuff, right? So I'm having a really successful start to the game. But, like, when it came to my Castellan shooting everything at Telemon, he pops his 2 CP strat, so I can't re-roll anything against it. So I can't re-roll to hit it, and I can't re-roll to wound it. So I literally, what wounds I do, he then basically tanks on his 4-up invuln. And he was rolling so hot for those 4-up in buttons. And I don't want to sort of suggest that there was anything weird going on with that, because again, I've been rolling hot most of the tournament at this point. And when I charged his shield captain on Jetbike with my gallant just one-shotted that shield captain. And this was the 5-up feel no pain 3-up invuln shield captain. And when I hit him with the I actually just used the chainsword, and I hit him 4 times. I did 4 wounds to him, and he rolled 4 2s. So, it's like one of those things where I'm like, well, now you've taken 24 damage.
Wow.
So how many 5s can you roll? Oh, it turns out not 25 or 18 as it would have needed to be. So yeah, I mean, like there were some good moments for me in the game, but in the end, he just basically custodied me because he was just durable as hell, and I just couldn't do anything to break him.
Yeah. So what's so good about his Telemon that made that like a crucial point in the game?
The reason why the Telemon is a crucial point in the game is because the entire sort of strategy for victory in that scenario was controlling the mid-table, and the Telemon is just such a good anchor that you just have to get rid of it, because you have basically, it was the mission with 5 objectives, 4 on the outside, 1 in the middle, and you have to dominate that middle point in order to win that mission. And Custodies are such that as long as that Telemon was alive, my knights were severely threatened, because the Telemon just walks up and goes, I hit on 2s, re-rolling 1s. I wound on 2s, re-rolling 1s. And it does 4 damage a time. So it literally just walks up to knights and goes, blap. And it's that thing where you just can't understate how powerful it is in the matchup. It's not always the case that the Telemon is that brutal, but against me, it's massive. So I had to kill it, but I didn't kill it. So as a result, I lost. And credit where credit's due to Jamie. Extraordinarily great guy to play against. And again, just a good tactical mind. He told me at the end, he was like, he basically, built his strategy around stopping my Gallant from getting into his Telemon, because he and I both acknowledged and understood that the Telemon was the key to his victory. And, by the end of the game, his Telemon was running around, murdering things still, and my army was mostly dead.
What was the final score then?
So the final score on that one was 66-94.
I mean, you still scored pretty highly.
Yeah, well, again, because I was still in contention in the early instances of it. But again, and also secondaries let me down. His army's really hard to pick secondaries against. And I banked on the fact that I could get rid of his Telemons and his armor threats early doors. Because had I killed his Telemon, I would have won really easily. But unfortunately, I didn't. So that's all it comes down to sometimes. It's like, that's the game, Again, I feel like I'm a good enough player to recognize what the threats are. But just sometimes, especially against Custodies, you just can't get it done. And that's it. Even with a Castellan doing volcano cannons and all the rest of it, it's like, well, when you can't re-roll everything like you're used to, it just becomes way less potent, and it's just one of those things. Again, after all of this, so basically, I went 3 wins, 2 losses, which I'm extraordinarily happy with, because I was lucky, because all my opponents were fantastic. There were some really good qualities of players on the Sunday and on the Saturday, to be fair to them. But overall, it was just a good experience. But the point that I did come away with is I think I need to take the Custodies out of the list for future iterations.
Aren't they?
And the Castellan, to be fair.
What would you take instead? Do you know?
So,
at that point, is it not just an AdMech army with
No. So the version of the list that I've written since that I'm pretty happy with, and I think will be pretty much like the optimal version of it, is a Crusader rather than the Castellan, because I think the Crusader is cheaper, but it also gives me the sort of anti-armor punch, but doesn't put too many CP eggs in the same basket because it's really expensive to make Castellans function. Still the Gallant, but then I've looked at 2 Morax armigers.
Oh, going the way of the Forge World.
The thing is, after I played against that Chaos Knight guy, Martin, they're so good.
Oh yeah,
Like you just for anti-horde, they're phenomenal.
yeah.
And it's literally like
it's every 6 is 2 extra hits. I think Garfield was saying in Overwatch, you managed to like wipe out a really tough squad of something.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's bananas. They're so good. So I'm thinking Crusader, 2 Morax, then the exact same Scutari detachment of Manipulus 20 Vanguard and the Kaladas, and then the 3rd Imperium detachment is, what do you think, Phil? What would I put in as my 3rd?
Well, I doubt it would be Guard, so I'm going to say Space Marines.
But what type of Space Marines do you reckon?
Is it? Well, it could be Death Watch, but I don't think it will be. I think you're going to say Dark Angels, probably Terminators, Deathwing.
No, it's Death Watch.
Oh, it's Death Watch. Oh, wow.
Yeah, Death Watch is what I've gone for. And the reason I like Death Watch is because I believe that with Death Watch you get really good. Basically, it's a really amazing 10-man OBSEC squad that is just durable and has so many more kind of like functions. And I've been mucking around with my kind of kill team options for it.
Is this like a Viclana Classic Kill Team Veterans, or like a kind of rather than the Primaris stuff?
Yeah, no, it's actually veterans
nice.
rather than Primaris. So I'm doing an Aquila kill team. So I'm actually running it with the Aquila add-on, which essentially means that I get to pick 2 targets that I can reroll 1s against.
Oh, nice.
Which is pretty reasonable. So it is. Let me tell you exactly what it is. So it is a captain with a Astartes chainsword, combi mounted jump pack, and then the stratagem of hero of the chapter, of which I've given the Ultramarines Warlord trait to regen CPs. And then it's a Proteus kill team with Aquila. It's a Black Shield with a Thunderhammer, 2 Deathwatch Terminators with Thunderhammer Storm Shields, 2 veterans with Bolt Gun Storm Shields, 2 veterans with the Frag Cannons, 1 Vanguard veteran with a Storm Shield and a Chainsword, and then a veteran biker, and then lastly a Watch Sergeant.
That is a proper mixed bag.
So
is it literally just like the 1 squad plus the captain?
Oh, and 4 servitors.
Oh, for just sitting on a backfield objectives or something.
Yeah, just having them in as extra bodies, because again, bodies is what you need for competitive. So servitors are so good for 30 points. Although I actually, be honest with you, upon evaluation, I think I've put the servitors into the AdMech detachment, because AdMech servitors have 6-up invulns.
Oh wow, yeah, might as well.
Well, they've got bionics, and bionics is a 6-up invuln in there, and they're 2 points cheaper. Not that I can spend those 2 points on anything that I've been able to find, but they are 2 points cheaper.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they're all right.
They can't do actions, though, or can they?
Yeah, they can do actions.
Oh, yeah.
Mind lock doesn't extend to actions, or even if it did, though, because that's the other thing as well. Because I've got the Tech Priest. The Tech Priest basically, works for the mind lock ability. So they basically, as long as they're within range of the Tech Priest, they're not under the they're not at weapon skill ballistic skill 5. They're weapon skill ballistic skill 4. Not that it matters, because they're just little throwaway 30 points of whatever.
Yeah. But I've always liked the idea of having them in the army. And it's weird. It seems like only recently people are kind of cottoning on to the fact that they're pretty good for secondaries, just because they're cheap. Because I guess for Space Marines, the other one's the company command squad, because you can take them as a 2-man squad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the revision I'm looking at the minute. But I'll be honest with you, my main focus now is just getting these Unnumbered Suns ready for RFW in end of November. That's my goal. Everything else is moot now. It's just all RFW.
That's good. Yeah, same. I need to get 2 Contemptors painted up, which is
Yeah.
going to be tight. I was going to say, how did you place overall? Do you know?
Sort of 160th, something like that. I can't remember the exact one. I think I'm in the high 60s, like 166, 165.
I mean,
But in the upper
600 odd,
percentile.
700 odd people. That's pretty good going.
Yeah, I'm pretty content with it. It feels like a good result, much better than I was expecting, which is cool. So, yeah, it was good. It was a good result for me, I'd say. Yeah, I'm happy with it. I think I got exactly what I wanted to achieve out of it, which is a fun weekend of playing 40k with random enemies, opponent people, and that was a laugh. And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing it again. And the thing is, it's good. I can't stress enough how great it feels to turn up to an event, not try harding, and by that I mean with no illusion that you're going to win. Like, when you really pour all the detail into it, like the people who turn up and go, I aspire to go 5-0. It's like you're just deluding yourself. Just try your best. Bring something that's fun. Don't because again, you could surprise yourself. I almost got 4 wins with a list that is objectively awful. So
I don't know. I think it's a very unusual list, but actually, you look at it and you go, "Well, it's still got a lot of strong units in there."
Yeah.
It's just probably not what's considered, the net list or the
Oh, of course.
optimized list, or like I said, it's a bit of a curveball for most people, which I think is might do well.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Phil, the clock is ticking on this one. I reckon, Phil, thinking about it, we should just roll it all up into the outro here. So, do we have anything specific? Grimaldus is new, isn't he? We could talk about him momentarily and then wrap this stuff up. So, yeah, in summary, LGT, fun times. Phil's going to Gibraltar soon. Tomorrow, in fact, isn't it, Phil?
It is, yes. I'll be on a flight in 13 hours.
Blimey.
Yeah.
Are you nervous, Phil? You've not been on a flight for a whole year. Does it fill you with concern?
No, well, I think I'm double jabbed up. I've got my
No, not that. Just the general fear of flying. Right?
Oh,
I mean,
no.
the horror.
Of being in the air against the will of the gravity, the space and time that's trying to constantly kill us.
Yes.
No, I think that bit overall, I'm relatively sound with.
Do you have a method for traveling on planes?
Just go to sleep. Yeah, just
Brilliant.
I'm a Londoner at heart, so any form of transportation or commute, I can just sleep through it on on the tube, just nod off for a few hours or however long it takes. I've got a very
I imagine it does take a few hours if you're in the business of nodding off. You're like, oh, hello.
Just going around that circle line several times.
Yeah, exactly. Where am I now? Like, oh, good.
Obviously can't do that now. It's no longer a circle, which is a bit of a shame.
False advertising in it.
No, I know. Yeah, but yeah, I've got a really good knack of waking up just before my stop. So
yeah,
innate ability that every Londoner learns.
They are good skills.
Yeah.
But anyway, in terms of that, obviously that's happening. You're going to Gibraltar. You're not, riding the tube.
If I could get the tube all the way there, that would be quite impressive.
That would be a pretty impressive feat of engineering right there. It could be achieved, but I don't know for what purpose. But yeah, so that's happened. But yeah, Grimaldus, he's new, isn't he? What do you reckon of Grimaldus?
He's not as good as Helbricht.
No, I agree. 7 out of 10.
He's all right. Yeah, the face grill that looks like weird teeth, I'm not a huge fan of.
That's probably one of the best bits of it.
It's not for me. I think overall it's okay. The Cenobite servitors I sort of love as a concept because I'm all about
strong.
chapter surf stuff. However, I don't think they're as good as what they should be, and even the same with Helbricht's little surf minis. Like, they're good, but they're the things that are most different from the original artwork. Because the original artwork, they basically got tons of wires like coming out of their face and hoods and all sorts. Whereas the Cenobite servitors are just like dudes with some like arm plugs, and maybe one of them's got like a missing arm or something attached to it, and that's it. Whereas the original ones, one of them had like a weird mace thing hanging off of half his arm, and yeah, all sorts of stuff. So I think they could have taken them in a bit more of a servitor vibe to them. But I'm just glad that we've got new servitor / serf type sculpts, so I'll take them. But they could be better, I think.
It's weird, isn't it? Really, because I suppose there's certain limitations of what they're able to achieve with, obviously the plastic processing in terms of like all those kind of wires and all those kind of bits. And I don't know. It's interesting, I suppose. I never really think about it, but I do believe, in my opinion, that the appearance of the servitors always feels, certainly the based on the minis that they showed, they're not quite as sort of ceremonially interesting as I might imagine them to otherwise be. Like, I'd like to have seen maybe more robed figures or things that sort of have a bit more of that, sort of more knightly look to them. But I don't know. It's perfectly fine the way it is. I think they're nice. They're nice enough for what they are. Grimaldus himself is just a bit. He's just a bit plain, and it's just sort of like yet another of the look, everyone, I found a thing mini. Like, he's just holding up.
Yeah, it's a very generic pose that they do, and I get why, because it's sort of like in an action stance. But I like it when models are doing other things, like they're posed but in different ways. Like there's a bit of swagger to them, or they're kind of a bit more casual, or they're like running, or they're doing a stoic pose, and he could have his crozium in both hands, a bit like the Dog Martyr model, but better. There are other ways of posing stuff other than, yes, the look it's here up in the air, which I think has gotten a bit of criticism online. I sort of see both sides of the argument, that there are lots of poses that are very similar, but there are also only so many ways you can pose stuff. But I think there are other ideas out there that could be explored. But then I think they probably go for the pose that most people will sort of want in their army. And if anyone's going to be holding something up in the air, it's the Emperor's Champion makes sense because of the original pose. A chaplain definitely makes sense just in terms of who the chaplain is. So yeah, that's sort of why the chaplain is.
Yeah, I do get it. I just sort of feel like, again, with the way that Grimaldus' sort of story was developed through Hell's Reach and other, sort of supporting narratives around him. I don't know, like,
Do you want a scenic base where he's literally coming out of the rubble?
No, I don't want that. I just want maybe more the idea of him actually being more of a kind of combatant or sort of more action orientated chaplain. Like the idea that, like, maybe the Crozius is, well, to be fair, he's always wielding his Crozius. That's fine, but maybe it's more just like,
he could be like batting it mid swing or something.
Yeah, something like that. More of a bringing it round, like a sort of like a mace or whatever. So
yeah,
sort of having a
action pose.
Yeah,
because you've got cool. Out this week is the new limited edition Captain from the Imperium magazine, issue 5.
Oh, yeah.
If anyone can get hold of it, and he's in this kind of odd stance, but that is definitely I'm blocking a shots sort of.
He looks like he's
pose.
posed like one of the old vampire lords from the old fantasy vampire.
Yeah.
Where, he had the swords up and he was kind of drinking the blood. He's got that same sort of weird, like, hey, I'm up in the air kind of thing.
Do you think Games Workshop is a bit like Disney, where, that you get those animation reels where it's like, oh, this scene from Robin Hood is just copied from Peter Pan or something, because they basically trace over the same like original videos, I guess, to repeat those animation styles. Do you think Games Workshop sometimes go, here you go, new person, just replicate this old model in terms of its pose? We worked it out, just kind of copy that, but with this new model instead. So,
well, I think the reality of it is how many poses are there, right? Like, I mean, what can you actually do? It's at this point in the game, everything's going to look like something else, isn't it?
Well,
Unless you're
exactly, because you've got so many Space Marines. And
Yeah,
even if
so
it's
unle-
not looking exactly like a Space Marine, it's going to look like some other model.
Yeah. So unless Grimaldus is doing a one-armed handstand, he's
He could
it's
be
very
riding on the back of his Cenobite servitors.
He could be, yes. He could be. He could be using them as a mount and
Exactly.
going like as
Yeehaw.
if he's yeehaw. Yeah, absolutely. And he's holding his helmet in one hand, like it's his cowboy hat.
Yeah.
He's,
Well, I did notice today on a slight tangent. So one of the Stormcast kits, the new chariot that they've got.
Oh yeah.
So
Quite a
those
nice kit
guys,
by all
or one,
accounts.
the I think there's a female and a male rider. The male one has two alternative hand poses. So one of them he's holding a two-handed spear, and then in the other one he's doing holding a bow and arrow. And it's really cool that they just give you that option. And with Marines and a lot of 40k stuff, pretty much by default you just get helmet or helmetless options, and that's great. And that's like a standard now that I really like. But it's like, why not just give us an extra arm pose? So quite often, base mini, here's your arms in one position with a certain loadout. Here's your arms in a slightly different position, and potentially just from those arms alone, you can totally change how the model looks. And giving us those kinds of variations would be cool.
They did that with Lazarus for the Dark Angels.
Oh.
So Lazarus can be built. The Lazarus kit can be built into 3 different variants of Dark Angels Captain. So you can take it as Lazarus, or you can take it as a generic captain with a power sword and then like a gun, or you can change it to a power fist. So it's like a loadout selection.
Okay, yeah, because I know with the new Marshal for Black Templars, one of the options is a combi bolter.
That was really cool.
Which is cool that there's another mini now with a Primaris combi weapon. But yeah, I think even when it comes to characters, just giving us more than a variation of a head swap would be cool. And I guess like another set of arms to do a slightly different position would be kind of a cool way of giving people these extra, someone's going to whinge about one pose, so give them another one or an alternative loadout or something, and that's always going to keep people happy.
Wow, indeed. Although, will anything ever keep people happy? People like you and me, Phil, can we ever be pleased?
Well, there'll always be something to gripe about, won't there?
Exactly. And that's what we'll continue to do. What are we going to talk about next week, you reckon, Phil?
Well, surely you'll give me a chance to talk about No Retreat and McCree.
Oh yes, of course.
Go through my list.
Absolutely. It's the annual Phil talks about.
It's the annual Krieg tactical seminar for all our Krieg fans. I'm going to update you on the state of Krieg and Astra Militarum.
What secondaries have you built the army list with in mind?
Well, that would be spoiling next episode, wouldn't it?
But have you actually got a strategy?
Oh, I do. I've thought about it. Funnily enough, so Tim, who I mentioned in the earlier segment, who I bumped into LGT, I actually had a little chit chat with him because I know he LG Tim, yes. Yeah. So he plays guard and he does a lot of scions. So I had a little chat with him because my grenadiers I'm running as scions now because Grenadiers have gone to Legends, so I spoke to Pardo, who's the organizer or one of the organizers of No Retreat, and said, "Are you okay with me running them as Scions?" He said, "Yes." So that's what I'm doing. I can't run them as the special Scions like Dragoons, Lambda Lions, or anything like that because that breaks the single mono detachment rules of the event. So they're standard, bog standard Codex Scions. So I get access to the one order and one relic that I could take for them. So I've effectively got 2 detachments, regular Krieg / Scions in the other one. So yeah, that's how I built it. And I have tailored the list specifically to do a bunch of secondaries that aren't killing because Krieg aren't good at that.
No, I understand. Strong strategy, mate.
Hopefully it works. I mean, I haven't had a practice game yet. Hopefully tomorrow, which is the Thursday when I fly out, I'll get at least one game in then against someone. and
What
test it
are
out.
you gunning for? 2 and 3, 3 and 2. Which side of the equation are you going for?
I think last time I did 2 wins, 3 losses, if I recall
Okay, so
correctly. If I can peak it to 3 wins and 2 losses, that would be grand. I doubt it though. Basically, it's a very marine heavy meta this year. There's a couple of Xenos players, one other potential guard player if he shows up with guard. It's James Oterio from Siege Studio. It's his fabled Catachan army, which he's been promising to bring for like 3 years now, and at the last minute it always turns into something else like Iron Warriors or Knights.
This is like you and your Minotaurs, I suppose.
Well, I've been for the last 2 years saying I'm going to take my Minotaurs to no retreat, and then I always go, no, I'm not going to get it done in time. Next year, however, I'm gunning.
Next year, however.
I'll have them ready for next year, hands down. I promise.
And then they won't let you in because you're the boy who cried wolf.
Exactly. They'd be like, you've said this far too many times.
Exactly. You're no good anymore.
I know.
Your money's no good here.
However, if I submit my application with at least 1,750 points of painted Minotaurs, then I think in the space of a whole year I can get those last few points painted up to make it 2,000.
You say this.
Well, yes, as long as I don't get distracted doing other things.
Which you always do.
No, I know. Yeah. What it will be next year, who knows? I think it will probably be more Thunder Warriors, to be honest. I'm really liking that.
Oh, that would be beautiful. Yeah. Well, get those done in time for when the Custodes book drops, and then you're going to be, sitting pretty.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Right, all right then. We'll try and talk about that next week, I suppose, and some other things, I imagine. Who knows what will happen? Until then, though, goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.